were born in a collection of terraced houses, somewhat similar to Coronation Street, all clustered together. And as a little lad, you know, from the back bedroom window, I could look down an alleyway and up another long back street and see the signal box on the main line from Manchester to through Bolton. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, it'd be magnificent on a moonlit night. You know, you could hear the whistle blowing as it were approaching Bolton, the locomotive, and it'd bash across the end of this ginnel with the fire hall door open and big shaft of fire in the sky, and you could see like 2 characters on the footplate, you know, crouched in position. You know, that's really what inspired me and got me interested in steam engines.
Fred Dibnah had a passion for steam-powered engines and machinery, and he spent a large part of his life restoring them and driving them around. It's a passion that has helped us to see just how important steam power was in our history.
Fred's passion for steam was something which absolutely oozed out of his personality, and the idea of solid, shiny machines with brass surfaces and polished steel is something that, if you have the bug for that, is something which stays with you forever. But Fred had a particular way of getting that over to people, which was particularly good for television as well.
Fred's interest went back to the time he was a small boy.
Now, we're almost born in the engine sheds, you know, it were only a slight detour on my way home from school to go to the engine sheds on Crescent Road, and the vision really has never left me, you know. There'd be row upon row of steam locomotives all getting steam up, and nearly dark in winter, you know, and all the smoke and all windows seem to be yellow in corners in all the little offices and everything, and that wonderful smell, you know, and fog and coal and black oil everywhere, you know. It were quite, to me, it were quite romantic, you know. I don't suppose it would have been to the modern day environmentalist a terrible place, but I enjoyed it. There's a lot of enthusiasm now for the steam railways, you know. It's a touch of when it's all gone, you know, everybody wants one, I think. But there's something about a steam locomotive, and when it's steamed up, it sort of comes to life, and it smells nice and all of that, you know, the sulphur in the smoke, you know, something that nobody, I don't think, can really explain. Can I come on board? Oh, there's a bit more room on here than last time they had me on, wasn't Whistle up it. 30 miles an hour. Beautiful. Casey Jones. All the way. To me, looking at a railway line now, you know, coming in and out of a big city, out in country, and all them stanchions and electric wires, you know, really terribly unsightly, you know, as against 2 beautiful silver streaks along in the fields, and just post and rail fences along each side, and the odd signal sticking up. You know, it looked a lot more picturesque then and more beautiful than what it is now. To me, now it's a hell of a mess, you know. I'm sure there could have been a better way than electricity. It's just cheap and convenient, and of course don't cost as much as steam engines.
Before Fred appeared on the scene, railway programmes on television, steam railway programmes, were seen as being very much the odd thing to be put on in the late hours of the night, and Fred brought it into the living rooms of millions of people. It was really very good indeed.
This locomotive behind me is a Stirling 060. That means it's got 6 driving wheels, and the actual crank axle is the middle one. And then, of course, the whole 6 are connected up with these outside connecting rods. And it was made in 1895. I mean, you've got to say something for them men who made these. Lasted all them years with, you know, maybe a few overhauls, but it's a great thing. And of course, they lasted forever. And they were sort of maids of all work. When they were first envisaged, they didn't even have a cab. I think I'll go and see if I can hitch a lift back to the station at the other end. Hi, how old's this one, Tony?
This was built in 1895 at Ashford in Kent.
Yeah. And it's, does it have much done to the boiler?
I think it was a bit of a pet for the apprentices.
Yeah,
they used to
always
do test
definitely, yeah.
pieces and what have you.
Yeah, for mending it, right? Yeah.
So all the plates are nice and thick,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
stayheads are in good condition.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Ah, so you got a good one.
When you see Fred riding on a steam locomotive, you're suddenly aware of how much fun it is for him, and you want to experience that too. It's much more fun than just reading it in a book or looking at it on the internet. And when he went to somewhere like the Bluebell line and showed us the people there who keep these things running, then he makes us appreciate not just our future technology, things that are being produced today, but also the real intricacy and specialisms that people had in the past. And I think that that's very important, that he gives us a sense through his own excitement and pleasure. He makes us enjoy it as well.
I enjoyed that. This locomotive behind me, Fenchurch, is what's known as a Terrier, which of course were like a very small locomotive and very popular in the southern counties and on the rural, like, little lines, you know. Designed by Mr. Stroudley in the 1870s, and they made quite a lot, you know. Lots of interesting features about it, you know, like the exhaust can be converted from going up the funnel or diverted into the water tanks, which of course preheats the water and saves a bit of water that would normally condense in the atmosphere. I mean, considering it were made in 1872 and it's still here, it's quite a credit to Mr. Stroudley. I think I'll go and see Clive now, who's going to give me a few lessons in how to drive it. Bit of rash on the regulator there. Keep it tickling over. Yeah.
And then you can accelerate a little bit more,
Yeah.
It is heavy, isn't it?
It's vicious, that, isn't it?
Fred was held in very great regard. A lot of us in the railway preservation movement are not very good at blowing our own trumpets. We do what we do it fairly quietly, and we bumble along merrily. What Fred did was to celebrate the world of steam, and the steam railway in particular, and the fact that he wasn't afraid to get on and have a go himself and enjoy himself. This was a fantastic thing, and people just loved the fact that he was there, his sense of fun, and that he was flying the flag for Britain's steam heritage.
Are you right, dear?
I think Fred's contribution to the standing of engineering history has been enormous.
You're like my lady fireman, eh?
There is this terrible cultural block almost that only people who wear sort of rigger boots and anoraks and are slightly socially challenged like steam engines.
Connected to the other one?
Yep, got a balancing pipe underneath.
So we're okay.
This awful word, the railway buff or steam buff. Fred wasn't that. You had to respect him. He was a working man. He had oily overalls. And as I say, he didn't just look at the subject out of context as an obsessive collector. He saw it as part of a whole world that he liked, whether it was chimneys or well-built buildings, stone, cobbles, the whole thing. He swept it all up. And so he made that contextualization of engineering history accessible.
The industrialisation of the great cities put a terrible strain on the antiquated water and sewage systems. Many new reservoirs were built, and of course, to pump water to them, many steam pumping stations had to be built. This is one of the more ornate. Papelwick, built in 1884, pumped water to the city of Nottingham all the way through till 1969. These are the 6 Lancashire boilers that made the steam to drive the pumping engines. They were made in Manchester by W&J Galloway. Mr. Galloway improved the Lancashire boiler by inserting vertical water tubes at the end of the fire tubes, which greatly increased the steaming capabilities. And down here they used 5 tons of coal a day on 3 of them. The other 3 were on standby, you know, they always did things like that at waterworks just in case. And the pressure's getting a bit low now, so I think I'll do a bit of stoking up and get Jeff to give me a lift, and then we can go and play with the steam engines round the corner. Come on, Jeff.
Well, I've done one side, Fred, so if you'll fire this side.
Right. Oh, small. When the engines and the building were finished, they were well under budget, and with all the money they had left over, they did all these wonderful embellishments like the stained glass windows and the terracotta bits outside, and the fish and the birds and everything. It's rather sad, really, that the general public never saw any of this, you know. Only like the waterworks superintendent and maybe some of the operatives, you know. But it really shows you how proud the Victorians were of their engineering achievements.
Fred shows his love of the Victorian age a great deal through his appreciation of what he could see. And he looked at pumping engines being a thing of great beauty, for example, the water supply and Papelwick down at Nottingham and Ryhope up here in Sunderland. You see, a modern electric pump doesn't hold the same appeal. Look at some of those engines lasting 150 years, and they're still here. How many of our electric pumps are going to be here in 10?
These great beams, of course, transfer the power from the piston rod to the pump rods down the well or the shaft. And of course, they weigh 13 tons each. Have you ever wondered how they got them up here? There were no fancy cranes in them days. There's lots of lovely old-fashioned pictures exist with great piles of great balks of timber, and they're basically jacking up the beam as the engine room came up, and then you slide them in over the top of the central beam that they pivot on. The eye bolts in the ceiling really are only for lifting bits and pieces up just to replace things like bearings or, you know, cotters and things of that nature.
Steam was Fred's thing entirely, whether it was our steamboat here, which he was very keen on, or the Newcomen engine, or other developments we've got, or anywhere. I mean, I don't think he could pass a chimney, which was his first interest, of course, without thinking, well, that's probably generating some steam. And then explaining to people what that steam was all about, whether he was driving his road engine or watching a stationary engine. I mean, steam was in his blood, if you could have such a thing.
And for his last series, he travelled around the country and gave us a real understanding of the practicalities of driving these engines.
The brand new fusible plug. It depends how many times you do it. Like, you can get away with a few do's, like with no water over the top, but one day it'll have you, you know, and that's it. You've got a ash pan off, fire bars out, black as hell, you know, terrible, you know. And it's always circumstances, you know, like no, all along flat, no hydrants. And then you come suddenly over the crest of an hill, the bloody great hole, you know, and the water disappears. What are you doing?
He was the common man in the streets that had made good. And people respected him because of his knowledge, his hands-on approach to everything. He didn't just talk about it, Fred. It wasn't that he was an armchair engineer, he'd read about it in the Victorian books. He went out there and did it. He was really a man out of his time because he had all his skills at his fingertips.
We have always been regarded as being slightly eccentric, wanting to play with dirty mechanical things, but that's the way we're made. And I think Fred's enthusiasm and interest made people understand that it was something that anybody could do and be interested in.
Right, well, pressure's dropping now, which means we need some more fire. So the fire down here.
And he always enjoyed meeting the next generation of enthusiasts.
Until we've stopped
It's their interest that will keep the steam preservation movement alive.
So, we stop the engine, then we can open the fire hole door. And put some coal in. Now, does it look as though it needs some? Yeah. Right, next to you there's a shovel. Got some coal enough already. If you'd like to lift that around. That's it. That will help build the fire up. Right in. That's about the right place. Just have a look. Right, look. Yep. Now we should be able to make some more steam now. Move. Right, here's Fred.
Did you get all that, young Edward? Yeah. I see you managed all right. It don't matter what you do as long as you don't lose the shovel. Now then, John, how many of these young chaps have you got on your trust?
Well, at the moment we've got about 4 or 5 regulars.
Yeah.
And there are 1 or 2 extras who sort of appear now and again as the
Yeah,
wind
yeah,
takes
I know
them.
what you mean, yeah.
But about 4 or 5 who are regular and
It's very good, really.
interesting. Well, it's where the future of our preservation movement
Oh, it is, without a
lies.
shadow of a doubt, yeah.
And we have to bring them on.
Yeah. You've got the right sort of cap for it, haven't you?
He has, yeah.
All
We
right
insisted on that.
Yeah. I've noticed in your shed you've got lots of projects afoot, you know. I think you don't mind if I go and have a look
No, there are
round
1 or
it?
2 things going on in there, I think you'll find.
I'll
see you later.
buzz off into the shed. What are you doing here then? Eh?
Well, we've just retubed the boiler and we're now having to expand the tubes, obviously make them watertight, stop any water coming out into the smoke box here.
Yeah, I've done a bit of that myself. It's hard work, innit? What's next stage? Fill it up with water.
And give it its pressure test.
Yeah, that's very good, yeah. And if it passes, the boiler inspector will give you a certificate and you can light a fire in it then. And then he'll come down and see it blowing off and then you can set off to a steam engine rally somewhere. That's a good day, that, when that happens.
You do the trunnion bar with the grease gun, because the trunnion bar goes through the firebox, it gets very hot, and it's got to have plenty of grease in there so that it doesn't seize up. You want to do that one, I'll lubricate the chain, and then we'll go for a trundle down the road.
Alright, now then, Phil, what you got this young man doing here?
He's being trained in the lubrication of the engine, Fred.
Oh, yeah.
And this is an important part of the engine.
Yeah.
Because the trunnion bar goes through the firebox and gets very hot. Different
yeah.
metals expanding at different rates.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure there's plenty of the old grease in there to keep it running smoothly. So,
Alright, and this is Neil, is it?
This is Neil, yeah.
A trainee.
Absolutely, yeah.
A trainee steamer.
One of our fine
You've got some
youngsters.
glasses like mine. Right, well, are you taking me for a ride, aren't
You bet you lie. Come on then, let's pack the stuff away.
Come on, young Neil.
I'll get up first.
Put your grease gun away.
Want to blow the whistle?
As well as road rollers, steam also used to provide the power for fairgrounds. And Fred was always inspired by these showman's engines.
He did actually go to the fairground in the early 1940s during the war with his mum and dad, which I think was Moor Lane in Bolton, and he did see the end of the sort of fairground engines on the making the electricity for the fairground.
One of the first rides I ever had on a traction engine were on one of these, you know. I'm going to ask the driver if I can steer it down the road with him. I think he'll let me, you know. They're all right, Chris? Yeah, right, mate, I'm coming. Hey. Right. Right. Mm. I knew a man who bought a fairground engine
And I often asked to play with the thing, but sort of I wanted one of my own, like, you know, you want your own toy, don't you? So about 30 odd years ago, I bought a steamroller. And I think I was ripped off. I paid £175 for it. You could buy a steamroller about that time for about £60 and, you know, just beat the scrap man. Anyway, time went by, and this steamroller was an incredible wreck.
Remember when that first came, and he parked it in Front Street, at front of the house, and believe me, you've never seen out like it. It was scrap iron. You want to give £5 for it.
So, painstakingly, over a period of 30 years and 2 divorces, which took a long time, I slowly but surely made a new one.
Excellent, in a word. I couldn't fault it. He'd taken meticulous care with every bit of the restoration of this engine. There was nothing about it that I could criticise at all. I've looked at many restored engines and boilers and so on, and I can honestly say I think this was the best I've ever seen.
Fred raised the awareness of steam to very great heights. The steam engine world was a very close-knit world. Everybody knew what was going on in the world amongst themselves, but nobody else did. And Fred appeared on the television with his steamroller, and it boosted everybody's interest in steam. They went to steam rallies mainly to see Fred Dibnah, but he wasn't at all the steam rallies, and it created a great deal of interest in the both road-going steam engines, rail steam engines and industrial steam engines.
They enjoyed that, didn't you? Hang on.
That's called running away.
Wait a minute.
Right.
Right, we're all here now.
It was difficult at times, but I really took it on board because when I came here, I could see how passionate Fred was about his engines and indeed everything in the garden. And really, that's who Fred was. It was the engines in his workshop.
Oh, let Rod have a go.
I never saw of it anything as being in competition with me and my place in Fred's life. The two things were parallel. You know, I think he loved us both in his way, but I wouldn't like to have hedged my bets. I think the steam engines would have come first, really.
Just back here.
He was certainly seen as the mascot for the steam preservation movement, which is a huge movement nowadays. He was also not quite so widely regarded as popular in the very early days.
I'm going for a pint.
I'm coming with you because I'm not a bloody camel.
There were instances, for instance, when the National Traction Engine Trust, which is the body that looks after the interests of traction engine owners, weren't altogether happy that this guy on the box whilst he was promoting their cause of traction engines and being out on the road with them, they weren't altogether happy that it made it look like it's one big pub crawl from one pub to another pint of beer, out again to the next pub, another pint.
Fred used to set off from the house probably 9 o'clock in the morning, and we'd get down to the Lever Bridge, get his first 3 pints, and then we'd perhaps trundle off for another half an hour to the next pub. And I kind of invented this phrase. When everybody used to stop and ask, how fast does it go? I used to say to them, oh, it used to go at 2 pubs an hour.
I think, considering, we're not doing too bad.
And that was basically what it was. We used to kind of stop and start. And I used to count how many of these pints I used to drink. And believe it or not, it used to be 16. I remember often counting 16 pints he'd had during one sort of day.
No, it's bloody good.
And also when Fred had quite a young family, they'd be sort of travelling on the trailer drawbar at the back by the living van. All sort of practices which were all a bit, perhaps you shouldn't be doing that. It was showing, bad practices. It made great telly, but it was showing bad practices. So it was kind of a bit of a love-hate relationship with Fred originally, but of course, you can't, a movement like that can't buy TV time like that, and it was great. The way it all ended up, of course, was absolutely fantastic.
When Fred first went on the television with his steeplejacking, and then he brought the steamroller into it, there was an instant massive following at the steam rallies. A lot of people was attending and, to go and see Fred, but also at the rallies when Fred wasn't there, it brought the attendance numbers up. So with being an engine owner, that was very good because, without people going and supporting the steam rallies, I'm afraid they would die a death.
Oh, now then, young man, how are you doing?
All right, Fred, and yourself?
You all right, mate?
Yeah, not too bad.
Don't worry about the oily ass.
No.
Used to that,
Right.
Yeah, Wallace and Stevens, eh?
That's right. She's,
amazing stuff.
Apparently, this is the only one of two left.
Yeah.
On an 8-horse single.
For the benefit of the viewers, that's a powerful engine, isn't it?
It is, yeah, she's very powerful.
8 horsepower is the
Yeah.
equivalent to a big road locomotive, like Atlas. It's good for see them doing something in it.
Well, we all like to see them out and about, don't
Yeah,
we? Not stuck
yeah.
in the shed, really. That's the beauty of it. And then everybody gets the enjoyment of it as well.
Yeah. I have a friend who's got a Clayton and Shuttleworth.
Is that right, yeah?
Yes. It's, what year's this one?
1919.
What's furthest you've driven it like, a long road?
Mainly back and forward, up and down the line here, actually.
Oh, you've not been in the middle of a city yet?
No, not yet, no.
That's good fun, that, with all traffic, yeah.
We did have a little run locally with her, and that's nice to see the modern tractors putting a hand up, waving to you, instead of the other way about.
Oh, you get lots of people even put up with the inconvenience of being behind you. I mean, they're not all like that. Some of them come by giving you rude signs and routing the routers.
Yeah.
Best thing to do with them then is blow the whistle very loud and drown them out, They can't hang about it, they've got to keep going, sort of thing. Yeah. So you've got the wife and all the kids with you, haven't you?
Yeah, they all take part in the engine and all have their little bit to do with it.
Yeah.
The passion we've got between us, so...
if you can find a wife that likes them, you're a lucky man.
Yeah.
The biggest problem with it is expense with it all, because no matter what you're doing, it is terrifically expensive. But Fred has brought a lot of awareness to all these projects that are going on, and I think, when people wouldn't visit an industrial museum, all of a sudden they've got an interest on a Sunday to get in the car and go and visit it because Fred's been there, or which helps the museums, which brings the money in, and better things happen, more's restored. So, yeah, without a doubt, he has brought awareness.
It is passion. Passion is the word. It was the passion that Fred had for steam that came out in everything he did, either on telly, off telly, at steam rallies. He was just so happy whenever he was near a steam engine of some sort, whether it was a huge beam engine or a traction engine in the field, and that absolutely came out in everything he did.
Magic. My interest in the mining business stems from when I was a small boy. Like a lot of people don't realise that in this village just down the road there were about 9 collieries of one sort and another, and there was once a company called the Darceleva Coal and Terracotta Company, and most of the people who owned these pits lived in this neighbourhood. This was like the posh end, The bit down the road they used to call Dolly Tub City, because I think they took washing in, subsidise the poor money they got. There are no less than about 9 collieries down there, and when I was a small boy, I used to go howling bricks down the shafts, and unless you've whizzed a brick down a mine shaft, you know, a very unbelievable noise, you know, boom, boom, boom.
When Fred Dibnah was a lad, coal was king, and Britain still had a flourishing mining industry. Mining and all the engineering that was involved always fascinated Fred.
I think the basis of it must have come because it born out of the skills and, well, the sheer toughness of the miners, the almost like a glamorous profession to Fred, who would look at a miner as being some kind of larger-than-life hero. And he had great respect for anybody, such as Alf Molyneux, who had been a miner in the past. To Fred, that was the definition of a proper man. Somebody who could do something that required a great degree of violence and skills and tenacity, really, and being a hard man. And those things were important to Fred.
Getting down to the coalface always excited him. And before the miners' strike and the pit closures of the Thatcher years, there had been plenty of coal mines for him to see around Bolton.
This is Astley Green Colliery near Manchester, and I've visited this site on many occasions over the years, and the very first one was 20 odd years ago when it was still actually going, or it were in the throes of being closed actually. And into that engine room over there, and I must say it were quite a fantastic sight watching the engine revolve at great speed, you know, when it still had ropes down the 1,000-yard deep shaft. Then on the second visit after that, dereliction, you know, the scrapman had been, and all the windows were broke in the engine house, and the rain were going in at one side and out at the other, and they'd nicked all the brass off the engine, and it looked very sad, and only beat the scrapman by the skin of its teeth. And now, of course, things are looking up for it. There's a dedicated body of enthusiasts and grants from here, there and everywhere.
Yeah, they had a lot of bother in 1908 when they sunk it. The water,
Yeah.
7/8 line with cast iron tubbing, isn't it?
Yeah, I've rode this shaft.
Oh.
I worked here for a spell in the 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was coal winding shaft, this. And I believe they're in process of getting monies together to get it repainted and refurbished properly.
Bed really up, you can see a few holes in it. Being as it is, it's the last one in Lancashire, really. You know, it's got to be worth...
It's worth saving, isn't it?
A big grant from lottery people. Keep it stood up, you know. If you want to open a ballet school, there'd be millions for you, you know, but not for paying something like that, which has kept a lot of families in bread and butter for a long time.
Hardly 20 years ago, there used to be the most modern pit in Europe here, Mosley Common. And what they did then when they closed it, they just buried everything. And hearsay is that there were millions of pounds worth of stuff under there.
Today, there's very little trace of this great industry, other than the remains of collieries like Lady Victoria near Edinburgh, which now houses the Scottish Mining Museum.
Yeah, this is the area of the pit where the maintenance men did all the stuff. You know, on this level they got all the locomotives down and all the bits and pieces. And this is the bell that did the signalling. I don't think anybody will come no more though, you know. Yeah. This is the bottom of the great headgear here. And then of course the top of the shaft, which went down I think for 1,500 feet into the bowels of the earth. All very quiet. And round here, this is where everything got sorted out. You know, all the coal got sorted out, and some went to the washeries, and some, I suppose, got loaded up onto trucks and sold around the town and the immediate neighbourhood. Yeah. This is a bank of 8 Lancashire boilers that once generated the steam to drive the winding engine. Of course, when they were first installed here, they would be hand-fired with coal, you know. Now, at a later date, for economy's sake, it's just coal dust, which were actually blown in with a fan system. So really it all run for nothing other than the maintenance of it all. Each one of them is 8 feet diameter and 30 feet long and weighs about 35 ton. A lot of scrap iron, really. In fact, it's a miracle that they haven't gone, because it's one of the few places left where there's such a big bank of these things still intact. Once it would be the scene of unbelievable activity with 1 million number 10 coal shovels flying about, and now it's quiet and peaceful. I think I'll go and look round the back, see if there's any economizers or weir pumps or anything mechanical of such nature. All my life I've been interested in sort of the mechanics of it all and the history of it all. How, like, the mineral, like coal and lead and tin and slate, were extracted out of the ground.
Can I have a go?
Well, I'm not going to stop you. That's too big to feet, we. Can you get up?
How much does he pay a week for this?
Oh, note. You're on note today. Freeman's.
The other thing that Fred brings out over is the comradeship amongst the people. It was the people that made this industry what it was, and Fred programs don't just focus on the archaeology, but he brings to life some of the people as well.
Can I have a job?
What do you mean he's not too hard? You've only done 2 minutes. We're another 8, 7 hours.
Fred always admired professions where the ordinary sort of workman had quite an arduous task. The harder it was, as in mining, the more he admired the men who had to do these jobs. The danger as well. You know, the fact that these men had to go underground for 8 to 10 hours a day, and every day potentially they might be killed during the working day. But had a very arduous job to do as well, a skilled job.
Not very long ago, England once had a vast mining industry, you know, and it's very sad to say it's practically nearly all gone, you know. There's still lots of places like Capos Colliery here where you can actually still go below ground and see how it used to be, you know. It's quite exciting, you know. It's still got a wooden headgear, you know, which is wonderful to me. Yeah then, David. All right, Fred? No, not so bad. See, you've still got a wooden headgear.
Aye, we have. It's one of the only ones left in Europe now.
Yeah, I can imagine. What year was this made?
This engine was installed in 1876.
Yeah.
In regular use until 1979.
Yeah, and it's still running.
Aye.
Yeah.
The indicator there tells us roughly whereabouts the cage is in the shaft.
Yeah.
As I start to come towards the top now, I start looking at the side of the drum for my markers so that I can stop to the inch.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for the letter T coming down. There it is, look.
That means that the
little
lines in the cage are level with the...
That's right. Aye, if you leave a step in it, they're not long in asking you what you're playing at or words to that effect.
Well, I've read in a mining boot near us in Wigan, the winding coal, they actually went at 57 miles an hour, the cage in shaft. When you looked at pictures of it, the size of wheels on top of the headgear, no wonder it's about 30-foot diameter.
Aye.
Big, well, that were a woodman. It's all very sad, really, isn't it, that it's practically all gone.
Well, it is, aye.
Yeah, Lancashire, there's no pits left at all.
No.
No, shut. Yeah. Yeah, anyway, we're due for a trip down into the bowels of the earth.
Yep, we'll go and have a look at our mine, shall we, Fred?
Right, yeah.
Right, this is the pit bank, Fred.
Oh, this is it, where we descend.
This is the brass riding check, so we know exactly how many people are underground at any one time.
If anything terrible happens,
that's it.
Nowhere else.
That's it, right. Right, then after you, Fred, you go.
Obviously, people in mining areas did understand the industry because it was their living. That's how they made the living, of course, but people from the non-mining areas, I think he did raise the profile, as it were, tremendously, yes. And his understanding of mining engineering was tremendous.
And around here we've got some of the drilling machines that we use, Fred.
Ah.
See, there's a very early ratchet one.
Oh, I've got one of them.
Hydraulic and compressed air ones. This one's the portable electric drill. It's the miner's equivalent to the Black & Decker, this one. You'd get it
Very
up there.
nice.
One chap would hold it up here on his shoulder, and you'd have about 3 of them shoving at the back. Aye.
That were all instead of one of them fancy fancy props.
Set off with a drill like that sort of length. Then it finish up with one about 8 foot. Get the hole in. Powder in, stem it up.
Don't meddle.
This one, and no, that's just for holding the bit in at the end.
Yeah,
that tungsten tip at the end. Yeah, just put a bit of wire through there, and that holds your bit in. Don't leave it down the hole then.
Oh yeah.
Right, we'll move on then, Fred.
Right, come on.
You see on the conveyor belt at this site, Fred?
Yeah.
The coal that we've got on it. And if you have a look at this,
Yeah.
you can see here.
Well, they used to throw that away in the olden days.
That's right, just like dust, but that's what they want at the power station. So we alter the discs on the machine to give us that type of coal.
Yeah.
Fred had a real enthusiasm for mining up until Fred made his series of programs. People all saw stereotypical mining areas as dirty, places where people used to go, come to work for 12 hours, go home, have a bath in front of the fire. I think what Fred did, he raised people's awareness of the fact they're actually fascinating places, and that the enormous amount of industrial heritage that we got and the archaeology that was there, where the remnants of these places have been left behind. So I think really Fred's raised the interest of people in so much as they now understand that they were fascinating places to work.
Now then, Fred, this is the business end of the job. That's the shearing machine. Look, that's your disc there.
Yeah.
Now that's designed to give us small coal for the power stations like we've just been looking at.
It's like a grindstone.
Just grinds it up into powder, You can see the pounder on the armoured face conveyor. That machine cuts your coal off, goes right down to the other end of the face, turns that cowl over, comes back up this way, putting the bottoms up there.
Yeah.
As he cuts that up, leaves a gap there at the front of the face side. And we've got to move these roof supports over then into that gap. And I'll just show you what type of noise that machine gives off as we go down. That's the noise that's going off all the time.
Sounds like my wireless when it's going wrong.
We get in well over 100,000 visitors each year. Likewise, the Welsh Mining Museum, they're approaching 200,000 people they get through their doors. And it's purely because people such as Fred are raising people's awareness of our industrial heritage, and people are actually now starting to find it interesting.
What happened at the back here when, all this lot's advancing along?
Once that had moved forward, everything at the back here caves in. That's solid caving, total caving we call it. Now the colliers, they liked it to drop flush up, flushed right up to the back. They didn't like to be able to look back there and see a football field hanging up.
An awesome sight, waiting.
Certainly was, aye. And when it did break, just sounded like an express train coming down the face.
Yeah, millions of tons of
all coming down at once,
coming down like a steam hammer.
Colliers are all trying to get off the face at the same time.
Let's go.
Right, let's get out of the way, let it settle until they come back. And the amount of dust that it displaces as well. Couldn't see your hand in front of you.
No. Yeah, it must have been quite scary if it didn't all come down fairly early, Bet some of them had a day off work in anticipation.
Your afternoon shift would be asking your day shift if the gob had broken, and if it hadn't, they'd be thinking, now then, shall we or shan't we? And they were all a bit nervous about it.
Superstitious lot, the miners.
Certainly were. Those are the old stories about Mondays and Fridays.
I don't think I would have ever liked to be like a ewer of coal or like a miner, sort of as the technical term is. But I would like to have been in on the sort of the beginnings of sinking a big pit like this one here behind us, the shaft 1,000 yards deep and 22 feet diameter, and all the problems that they had, half of this shaft is lime with cast iron tubbing, like a big cast iron tube in sections, a bit like the underground in London. And I do believe they actually froze the ground around to keep the water back while they got through it into the more solid stuff down below.
I think sometimes industrial history, engineering history, is played down too much. People get excited about kings and queens, but not necessarily about the great men and women who made Britain the powerhouse of the Industrial Revolution. And when he takes us to somewhere like the Coal Mining Museum, he shows us how coal was essential for steam production, and that was essential for steel production, and the whole thing fits together. And suddenly your eyes are opened.
This is Big Pit here in Blenavon, and here you can actually see how the coal and iron industries altered the landscape of the South Wales valleys. Blenavon Ironworks is situated just behind me over there, and it was the growth in iron production that led to the great increase in the demand for coal. If you look behind me over there, you know, all them pit heaps, and 100 years ago it must have been an unbelievable sight of, you know, the mining industry. And then you look a bit further sort of south and you can see where the ironworks were, you know, they were definitely all there to feed the hungry mouths of the blast furnaces on the ironworks.
Well, a lot of people think that Fred was just a hands-on sort of approach type of person. Really, Fred was quite well read, and any information he could find out on any subject that took his fancy, he would pursue avidly, sort of thing. Often, when I worked at the Mining Museum, I would carry out a bit of research for him on different aspects of engineering and mining, and he just soaked up any new knowledge, but really keen. After you.
Right. This originally had a wooden headgear. How long has this iron one been here?
Well, since 1922 it was changed from wood to iron.
Yeah.
Of course, like everything else, like I saw, it's all getting old and it needs to be repaired and kept in good order, shall we say. Nice windy day you've picked anyway.
Yeah. I wonder how many pits there were over there when you think about it.
62, I think there was.
Yeah.
As well as levels, loads and loads, hundreds of levels.
When did they actually disappear, you know?
Well, they've been there for a long time because the surface, the coal's right near the surface, and of course people just came along, scratched in and had what they wanted.
Did little drift mines and all them little...
All those little spoilage, that's all where people have been busy having themselves some coal. Here we are then, Fred, welcome to my world.
Ah, yeah. Oh, it's all exciting stuff up here, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, here we are on top of the winding gear of the big pits in Glenavon, you know. What diameter are these wheels?
I'd say about 16 feet, Fred.
Yeah, I know you were telling me earlier you're going to have to lift them up to put some new bearings in.
We're going to change the bearings, yeah. That'll be a nice little job. We're going to up the ladder and...
Yeah, what sort of gear, what will you use for actually?
A couple of lifting
like
blocks.
Just chain blocks, yeah. If ever you had to get one down, you know, you'd have, of course...
Well, it'd be a crane, I would think, then.
Yeah.
It's a bit awkward to get a crane up here, but we'll manage, I suppose.
I mean, I wonder how they went on. You see old pit headgears and there's
none of this.
Yeah, no gantry over the top, you know, and yet they got the damn things up, didn't they? Must have just had fur poles.
Well, you have the one half and I'll have the other.
Yeah. There'll be a ton or two in one of them on there.
A few ton, yeah.
Because of Fred's personal interest in the coal mining industry, I think it's been really good the way Fred has reminded people how important our mining industry was. Sadly, recently lost. So Fred has highlighted what remains around the country, and obviously the building of his mine in his own backyard, in a sense, that shows you the extent of his enthusiasm. And that interest really has spread widely to people who didn't really know much about mining history.
It's really a bit unusual to have a pit headgear in your back garden, you know, especially if you live in a reasonably residential area. Not everybody got one, you know. The thing is that I've got a grand plan and this pit headgear is part of it. I've got this plan to actually build a replica coal mine in my garden, which I've had for a long time, you know. I hope, you know, the powers that be will let me do it.
This idea sort of gradually emerged that Fred would obviously like to have a mine of his own. And Fred said he needed an illustration of a traditional pit headgear, a wooden one, say about 30 foot high, that possibly he could duplicate. And I tracked one down of a colliery at Blackrod near Bolton. I showed it to Fred and he was very excited. He said, "Oh yeah, I can make one of those." And off he went and made a start.
Wherever you went to a preserved colliery that had shut and they decided to make it into a museum, it weren't really quite like what it were like, because they didn't wine coal anymore, and there were all this violent activity at the top of the shaft had nearly all gone.
So he wanted to pick that sort of thing, but he wanted it moving as well. He wanted a tub of coal come up the shaft, go onto an haulage system, run down the hill, in the tunnel and back up the shaft to show something actually moving.
It's very sad when you go to all these preserved collieries and you look at them and they're like a shadow of the former self, you see. The top of a mine shaft in the olden days when they were winding tubs up, it were very violent, you know, there were unbelievable action and really quick and a lot of bell ringing and clanging and what have you, boom, boom, ding, dong, dong, and boom, gone. What I want to try and create is a scene like that. We've got all the ingredients, we've got the fans, we've got everything we need, really. We've got sauce for sawing pit props up, we've got sauce for, you know, doing everything, really. And our own metalworking machinery, which, of course, will help with all the, you know, every good colliery had its own blacksmith shop and mechanic shop where them men were second to none. They could build you anything you wanted, you know, because it was necessary. It's a great shame what happened to our coal industry, really. Now we're breeding a nation, I'm afraid to say, who won't even know what them men did. You know, they've all gone. Going to break now, that's it. A few months ago, when this were all a dream, I didn't really think we'd have got on so good in a way.
Got a good team.
Yeah, I know, well, real mining men, you know. Yeah, I'm in my best waistcoat here. Doing that, I should have a bowler hat on there.
To me a bit.
There's lots of good pictures of shaft sinking like this, where they're all stood around, you know. There's always one old guy with a big belly and a waistcoat with a gold watch chain. I'm in charge.
We have one of them.
I know, yeah.
I think Fred liked to see himself as the colliery manager, sort of stood there with his waistcoat on and overseeing operations, really.
Hello, my love.
We were his sort of his miners, in a sense.
Answering because I was working with Fred and we're in a very difficult situation.
I think it's fair to say that the only time that Fred was truly happy is when he was in his garden. There was just so much that he wanted to achieve here. Certainly in the last year of his life when he started wanting to dig his pit. And it's a great pity, really. He didn't get a chance to finish that. I wasn't very happy about it at first, I must admit. When he came up to me with the idea of digging 150 foot in our back garden, I was absolutely terrified because it's only several feet away from the back door. And I considered myself, I might be in a position where I woke up one morning and the house was sliding down. But of course Fred had all this great engineering capability and skill, and he had many friends who were ex-miners, and I think it's fair to say that if he'd accomplished that, carried on to do it, he would have been okay. I don't think we'd have had any major landslides in the area.
We started really in secret to sink the shaft. My wife initially kicked up a bit of a stink that she just thought, me and a woman, you know, we were just going to dig an hole and not support the sides, and the garden had disappeared and the house had disappeared, which is a load of nonsense, you see. I've got about 3 sets of mining management books, you know, from the great days of when they actually did it. And at the bottom of all this brickwork, there's a big iron ring that's got an hole in it, the size of the inner diameter of the brickwork. The modus operandi, that means how you do it, I think, is to get the ring, set that up at ground level like we did here at the top at first, and then lay about 2 foot of brickwork on it, and then dig down about 3 feet and lower the ring into the ground.
It was the graft, sheer hard graft, that was important to Fred. If you could do that, if you could, like when he started digging the pit outside, if I'd have showed willing and gone down there and shifted a load of several tons of earth, then I'd have been in his good books.
But digging the mine shaft wasn't just hard graft. Fred enjoyed the challenges the project presented, and he came up with his own unique solutions, like his method of surveying how deep the shaft would have to be dug.
But there's only one important measurement that we haven't got, and that's the difference in height in between the garden down there and the river.
Oh, right.
Where the tunnel's going like. Now, I've had a brilliant idea. Going like this. If we get a bow and arrow, bow and arrow, yeah.
Go on.
And a plank.
Go on.
We get the plank, and we mount it up so it's like a theodolite, you know what these surveyor fellas on. This is surveying in its crudest form. And we level up the plank in garden, facing out over the valley. And then we get the bow and arrow with a ball of string, and we fire the bloody string over a tall branch down in the valley.
Things in bloody Robin Hood.
Oh, you laughing?
Go on.
Yeah, I reckon if we get the ball of string,
I've
got
got
a
a
little
string.
practice with it, it'll come off there really fast. We just undo this bit of slack, what's not wrapped on it proper. Right. See, that'll come off there, I reckon, really easy, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, first job's the arrow. Now the grand plan is to fire it as high up to that limb that's going out over the river as I can. And hopefully the arrow will come down somewhere in the middle of the river.
Right.
Or if there's nobody, you know.
I have every confidence in you, as long as I'm this side of the bow.
Wait a minute. I'll say just.
There's one man across the river in Cemetery digging a grave. Wait till he's dug it before you fire. You know, bloody shot us.
Where's it gone?
Here.
Well,
You
why did
bloody
it
shot
not?
us.
It's tied a knot round there.
Well, that's because you had it over to top of the string. Eh?
We'll have another go. But the thing is, it's not like a projectile, is it? There's no weight in it. We want a nut squeezing on the end of there, you know.
Let's have a look at size.
Yeah. There's, I think.
Quarter somewhat.
We'll all look, and then we might find one.
A quarter.
Definitely not heavy enough. Done it. Brilliant.
It's going down. It's going down.
Yeah.
It's going down. It's doing the job.
Ha Success. This rather sad-looking railway viaduct behind me, it means a lot to me, you know, because right from being a very small boy, I used to go climbing in the iron girders when I was about 8 years old. And when a locomotive came along with a load of coal wagons on, the whole lot used to shake about, you know.
As Fred Dibnah was growing up in Bolton, he was surrounded by canals, railway lines, bridges and tunnels. He was always fascinated by great civil engineering projects like this, and by the lives of the men who changed the landscape of Britain forever. But the navvies who built the canals and the railways were not the first engineers to leave their mark on our landscape.
This is one of the oldest megalithic monuments in Europe. It's even older than Stonehenge. It were developed, so they say, somewhere around about 2500 to 2200 BC, and that's a long time ago. The whole site covers a vast area, you know. I mean, you can actually see some of the earliest examples of building and construction work in all of Great Britain. And this great trench covers 3/4 of a mile and 15 feet deep and dug with antlers.
He wasn't the only person doing the sort of thing he was doing, but by goodness, he was the one who was looking at a whole range of things. I think that's what's impressive about him. He wasn't simply looking at the things which he himself had dealt with over many years, but he understood such a range of structures, of engineering enterprises, and what had brought them about.
I mean, it's one heck of an achievement, isn't it, for 4,500 years old, eh?
It's tremendous size and the depth of the ditch.
Yeah. You know, it'll have lost a bit of depth, really, won't it, when you think
We're
of
only-
all the years and the erosion and the washing of the stuff back down the hole, as you might say.
Yes, we know from early excavations we're only
Yeah.
looking at the top third of the ditch
Yeah,
here. The
yeah,
rest
yeah.
is infilled with material
Yeah.
that's slumped in
Yeah,
over the centuries.
Now then, how did they do it? That's the thing, so long ago.
Well, simple tools, Fred, but well-organised labour, I think. I mean, what have we got here? We've,
yeah.
The most important tool that survives is the red deer antler pick. Of course, they could have had other tools, wood and basketry and so on, that wouldn't survive to us. But this is the one that is so widely found on these early prehistoric sites. But it's important, Fred, not to think of it as a
like-
pickaxe.
like
yeah,
that,
it
yeah.
hasn't got the weight. And not
Yeah.
to think of it as a pickaxe the way we use a pickaxe.
Yeah.
On prehistoric antlers, very often, the back of what's called the coronet, where the
Come
antler
onto the
joined the skull,
yeah.
that's it is heavily battered on worn examples, which suggests they used something like a maul or a mallet and drove the point in and then used it as a levering tool.
Yeah.
Then, of course, for shoveling, these ox shoulder blades are sometimes found on these sites, and they've always been cited as the equivalent of a shovel. It's actually a little questionable whether they would really shift enough material and whether you'd have enough leverage.
Yeah, these stones, they look very similar material to Stonehenge.
They are exactly the same sarsen stone, it's called, as the outer trilithons at Stonehenge, Fred.
How many stones do you think there were in the whole circle altogether?
We think there were 98 stones, 98 or 99, in the outer circle, and of course there are the smaller features, the two inner circles inside.
I think Fred made a lot of people keener to visit the past because he had a particularly accessible way of talking about things.
Yeah, they wouldn't have been too hot on surveying in them days, would they?
He didn't come to it from the point of view of an academic or any other sort of middle-class approach, really. I mean, he's seen as sort of the common man, and I think that helped to make it more accessible.
Fred made connections between early engineering and the way Britain's landscape changed. And he did it in the voice of a man who knew all about the construction industry.
When the Romans came to Britain, they brought with them a far more sophisticated building techniques than what we'd ever had before, you know. Hadrian's Wall here is the biggest monument that the Roman Empire left behind for us. Work started in the year of 122 AD, and it took 6 years to build, you know. I mean, they worked bloody hard, you know. It's an amazing piece of work, you know. And for 300 years, it was the Roman Empire's northwest frontier. Its purpose was to stop the marauding Scotsmen getting across the border. Or as Hadrian put it, to stop the barbarians getting towards the Romans. Of all the forts along Hadrian's Wall, Housteads is one of the best preserved. You can see the remains of the governor's house, a magnificent drainage system that works its way all down the side of the hill. The bathhouse and the latrines or the toilets, you know, it's all here, and you know, it's been like nicely uncovered, as you might say, so everybody can see just really what it was like. Yeah, this really is one of the highlights of the whole fort, you know, the communal bathtub and the communal toilets, and it's got a rather ingenious watercourse system. They didn't have toilet paper then, they had sponges,
when you were sat chatting with your mate on the old thunderbox, you reached over with your sponge and washed it in the groove, which of course is round here. This is the groove here that it sort of ran, the overflow water ran and dripped into here and ran round here. It went all the way down there, round the end and back along here, and then into the main flow of water that God knows where that come from, but it took all the affluent away, downhill down there, round the corner and back down and down that tunnel there that mysteriously disappears underneath the fields. But I suppose it all ran out down the hill where the sheep are, and it must have been a bit stinky down there in them days. You know. But it's amazing how it's all survived.
Stretching right across the country, Hadrian's Wall was a great feat of civil engineering. But it was not until the first canals were built in the 18th century that anything else on quite the same scale was attempted.
The canals were like the arteries of the Industrial Revolution. They helped to provide cheaper goods and raw materials. They also cut the travelling time down from London to Birmingham to a speedy 4 or 5 days. And it all started off round here at Worsley, near where I live. Some say the Duke of Bridgewater was thwarted in love, so he channeled all his energies into a grand plan to build a canal from Worsley to Manchester, to get coal there for all the spinning mills that were being built at the time. And of course he engaged the services of a very clever engineer called James Brindley. This is Worsley Canal Basin, and 250 years ago were an hive of activity around here. Little boats like that one over there came through the remains of this here sluice gate here, and of course out of this tunnel over here, loaded with coal, and then when they got it in the basin they offloaded it into bigger canal boats and off it went to Manchester. This tunnel behind me here is the entrance to a labyrinth of 52 miles of underground canal workings, which of course connected the Duke of Bridgewater's coal workings to the Bridgewater Canal.
Fred makes the past accessible, and he does that through a very personal journey through objects and places. He constantly refers to his own experience, which means that we can then enjoy it through his eyes, and we want to experience it alongside him.
When I was a little lad, you know, my dad used to say, come on today, if somewhere out, you know, we'll go and look at the 8th wonder of the world, Barton Bridge. And we used to bike all the way from Bolton to here just to watch it. In them days, of course, it was quite busy. It moved with monotonous regularity. When the canal was first being built, W.G. Armstrong and Company got the contract for all the hydraulics, which all along the canal from Liverpool to Manchester, works all the locks and the bridges, the swing bridges at Warrington and all that. But this bit here is the most impressive bit, where 800 tons of water down there, supported on a central pivot, and it's a slice of the Bridgewater Canal, which of course also goes to Manchester from the Duke of Bridgewater's mines when he had it. The thing is that shortly it's going to turn through 90 degrees, and we'll see another boat sail across the top of the Manchester Ship Canal.
Fred's enthusiasm for the canal network and the way that he was able to talk about it and explain how things were built and go to places which are very inspiring places, and people seeing those on film, when it did make people want to go out and know more about the canal network. It's not uncommon for somebody to say, oh, I remember seeing this on the television, and by and large it will be through one of Fred's programmes.
I mean, really, I suppose the credit goes to the guys that actually built all of this. You know, the main canals, they got people working that they call navies or navigators, because they were building a waterway. Though I suspect when it came to the tunnels, they got the same guys maybe doing the actual mining work, but the actual construction of the brickwork and the arches and everything in the tunnels, they probably got more skilled labour in to do those.
Masons and bricklayers.
Yeah.
Modern canal boats have got engines, but of course, in the olden days they had horses. And what did you do with the horse when you come to a tunnel like this?
Well, it's quite simple, really. They used to either let the horse wander over the top of the hill itself, or one of the boat crew would lead it over, one of the kids maybe.
Yeah.
And then they'd have to use manpower to get the boats through.
What, 70 tonne of tattle?
Yeah, well, there'd probably be about 30 tonne of goods in the boat, and the boat
yeah.
would probably weigh about 10, 15 tonnes.
Yeah.
And the one method was to use a boat shaft and push on the roof of the tunnel, but that used to wear the bricks away, as you see the centre of the roof.
Noticed a lot of pointing in the middle.
That's it. So the canal company owners preferred them to use the art of legging. You could hire professional leggers to do the job.
Yeah.
Back in the 1700s, it would have cost you 1 6 to get your boat through the tunnel, and it would take about 4 hours to get a loaded boat through.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd work 7 days a week, including Christmas Day, if boats were waiting to come through.
Ah. Does anybody ever do that now?
Oh yeah, all the visitors come along, and things have changed a bit from where people got paid to do the legging to where people pay us to let them do the legging. Do you want to have a go?
Oh, everyone.
Right, we've got a legging board here.
Right.
Put the legging board across the middle of the boat, and this is where we have to get friendly, Fred.
Yes, right.
So we have to lie flat on this with our bottoms near the edge, feet up on the wall, and if we're tall enough, though you and I might not be able to do it, put our heads on each other's shoulders, and then just walk along the tunnel.
We'll have a go.
So,
how's that? Right. I'm going to enjoy this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Drop down flat.
Like that. Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Which way are we going? Towards the...
Push your feet towards the stern end of the boat, towards the cabin.
Right. Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm fine. You see why I get the visitors to do it,
Yeah. I don't fancy it for about 2 miles, though.
So you don't want to do it for a living, then?
No. Soon to be a traction engine driver.
Yeah.
You'll have bloody super legs, eh? I think my cap's falling off. Yeah.
You're not doing bad, though, Fred.
No.
Right?
No.
But you can't use your steam engine, huh? Either you or me losing some money there.
Yeah.
They had to dig the construction shafts down, and then they dug out in 2 directions and met up with a team digging from another construction shaft.
Yeah, same as the railway job.
Yeah, light at the end of the tunnel.
Fred has shown us the importance of the everyday, of the history all around us, of the history on our doorstep. That history isn't only something that you sort of pay to go and see in special sort of heritage hotspots. It's something that's everywhere, and it's a way of looking at where you are.
Well, we're now about to go over Mr. Talford's famous aqueduct. I've read a lot about it and seen it on postcards and all, but sorry I can't pay more attention, I'm steering the ship. And the sides are very thin, made of cast iron. And number one, it would be better if I got it lined up right.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
No doubt it has had a bash or two in its time, has it?
There we go, it has, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, we're just going on now.
Yeah. How much space have we got on each side?
When the boat's on it, you got about 3 inches.
Yeah.
3 or 4 inches.
Yeah, well, we're going to bump into the side. And then are all the bolts, the nuts and bolts on the flanges outside?
Yeah, they got plates with the nuts and bolts on.
Yeah.
They did reckon that they used the oxblood and that when they did the joint.
And the Welsh flannel and red lead. I wonder what these other holes were for.
I don't know. It never ever had a rail on, as far as we know.
How long roughly did it take to build the thing?
It was 10 years. Started in 1795.
A fair amount of time. So they didn't do it in a hurry, did they?
Oh no.
How high is it?
126 feet at the highest point.
Yeah. Oh, this is an interesting bit. Is this about the middle, is it? Or is it?
We're roughly getting on for the middle now, yeah.
Yeah, there's a change of direction in the slabs, isn't there? Yeah.
And it carries the Shrop's Union Canal over.
Yeah.
The water from the River Dee. Some winters, when you get a very hard winter, they have to break the ice on it. Otherwise, it would push the sides out.
Yeah.
They do break the ice on it.
That is an important thing, isn't it? That?
Yes.
That if it did freeze, it'd not do it any good.
No.
But we have had time where it's been a foot thick of ice on,
Yeah.
on top.
How deep is it?
Yeah, it's about 5 foot.
Yeah. Yeah,
In the middle of the trough
so
there.
you'd get an old-fashioned canal boat with a load of coal on it, come over easy, wouldn't it?
As long as it's 6'10" wide, you're okay.
Yeah. Now then, this bridge, this aqueduct, has a strange name that I can't pronounce, so I'm going to let you do it.
Yeah, it's called the Pont Cysutli Aqueduct.
The
Pont Cysutli.
Pontycutli Aqueduct.
Yes.
I told you I get it right.
Bit of practice.
Yeah.
He was always pointing out where the history of how the canal system had developed and how it had been influenced by the railways and the roads beyond that. So I think he was very effective at being able to tell the story of transport development in the UK.
The aqueduct isn't the only great engineering feat of Thomas Telford that can be seen in North Wales. This historic suspension bridge near Conway Castle was designed by Telford for the great highway from Chester to Holyhead. It was built at the same time as the one he built at the Menai Straits and was opened in 1826. The first suspension bridge in Europe had been built over the River Tees in 1741, and it was revolutionary because it used chains, and the idea soon caught on all over Europe, you know. It was Telford and Captain Samuel Brown who perfected the manufacturing of wrought iron chains like these, and it enabled them to build this one and the one over the Menai Straits. Telford surveyed quite a few places round Conway for his bridge, but he selected this place here near the castle because the rock for the anchors, the anchor chambers, was superior to anywhere else, and there were plenty of it. It started in 1822 when the first stones were laid, and then they got the chains across in rather an unconventional way. They built a ordinary rope bridge first and started from each end advancing towards the centre. It must have been a bit nervy with all that tonnage resting on ordinary ropes, and then finally the middle pin went in, and the things, once they got the chains across, it was quite a simple job putting the vertical bolts or bars down to the road surface and building the road on it. And in all, it took a little more than 4 years, I think, to construct. All the ironwork was made in a workshop in Shrewsbury, and basically each chain consists of 5 bars about 10 feet long by about 4 by about 1.25 inches thick, with an eye forged on each end. And they're all held together by fish plates that are spaced in between them, and then 2 great bolts slammed through the lot about 3 inches diameter. It's certainly a good bit of drilling and fixing. It sort of stood the test of time. Once Telford had got the great chains across, the rest of it were pretty simple, you know, the vertical tie rods and the deck. And by 1826 it were finished and open to traffic. And in 1849, Robert Stevenson came along and built this thing here, which is where his railway to Holyhead. And of course, basically, it's just a great big iron box riveted together. I suppose there's more to it than that, really, but that's what, you know, it looks like to most people. Another great feat of railway bridge building. Before Queen Victoria came to the throne, Great Britain had been still a largely agricultural land, even though the development of the steam engine and the improvement in iron making had fueled the Industrial Revolution. A Georgian farmer looking out of his bedroom window would have seen a scene similar to that over there, even as late as 1820. The coming of the railways put the Industrial Revolution into top gear, and it completely changed the face of the country. You know, it made transport all over the shore possible, moving much heavier weights than had been done before. I mean, up till these things, you know, we were horse and carts on dirt roads and they're sinking in the mud in the winter. With the application of the new technology to transport and the development of the world's first successful railway, from the beginning of Queen Victoria's reign to the end of it, she saw England change dramatically. Not only did she see the country covered by a vast network of railways, she saw sail give way to steam on the oceans, the great spread of industry and chimneys and pollution, and the first electric trams and even the motor car.
I think he opened people's eyes to this history all around them, particularly in industrial areas. And after all, the Industrial Revolution changed every town in this country. Every town in this country suddenly got, a railway, it suddenly got water, it suddenly got, later on, gas and then electricity and so on, all of which was a sort of all-pervading change. And people haven't tended to recognise just how significant that change was.
During the early part of Queen Victoria's reign, most towns were quite small, and the fact that we had this great wealth of coal and iron ore changed all that, it turned us into a vast industrial society that had a great empire and we half ruled the world. The rise in manufacturing and mining and trade and industry brought us, of course, great wealth, and it completely changed the face of the countryside. Pit headgears and pit villages like this one here at Beamish began to appear all over the country to fuel the great industrial expansion of the time.
Fred has been able to explain what motivated these people and really on the level of knowledge and understanding which existed at the time, what gigantic leaps they were taking in transforming what was really an agricultural or an agrarian economy into an industrial economy, introducing new technologies and building new infrastructure for the nation.
Railways became a great symbol of our industrial might and ingenuity, and of course it was very important to us, I suppose, in early Victorian times. I mean, this wonderful bridge behind me was actually copied off a Roman viaduct somewhere in Spain, so really the technical stuff of the early days of railway building, they copied off the Romans.
Getting into his real passion in the 19th century of the extraordinary endeavours of engineers who are still much less well known than they ought to be, both for their world achievement and what their vision was, how they managed to carry things through. And I think bringing that out and putting it to an audience who are quite unaccustomed to that sort of thing was brilliant. It's made a lot of people think a great deal more about the bridges they go across and the great structures they pass.
By the end of Queen Victoria's reign, they were spanning much greater spans than this, like the Forth Bridge and the bridge at Saltash. Really, our engineers, and our civil engineers, what made them heroes in the eyes of the Victorians, I think, were the way that they covered England in a matter of a few years with the biggest railway network in the world. A bit like motorways today, but there were twice as many railways.
For Fred, the greatest of the Victorian engineers was Isambard Kingdom Brunel. His papers are kept at Bristol University Library.
Yeah, he was obviously a man of great ambition and drive, I mean, he spent lots of time away from home and in his family and all that. I mean, but he did keep in touch. He wrote back home from time to time. There's a lovely letter here to his wife, Mary, that shows what sort of a guy he were, really. He says, "I have walked today 18 miles from Bathford Bridge, and I'm not really tired, In fact, it goes a bit further on and says that if he'd have got there a bit earlier, he'd have caught the train down to London and come back on the goods train early in the morning, What a fella, Looks harder than climbing chimneys, that. And here's a lovely letter from Stevenson to Brunel, and it says, "Dear Brunel, on the 11th I shall be going down to Conway and the Straits, and I shall be delighted if you will come with me and give the aid of your thoughts about these tubes," and the big tubes on the bridge, "both as to the riveting and the hoisting. I think you will be pleased, and we could then discuss not only your mode of punching, that must have been like punching the rivet holes through the metal plates, but lots of other things, It's really nice." While Stevenson were building his railway from London to Birmingham and his line to Holyhead, Brunel were down here doing his Great Western Railway.
And of course from London to Chippenham it was quite flat. But when he got here, in between Chippenham and Bath, there was this great lump called Box Hill, and he decided that he would drive a tunnel straight through it. It involved, of course, a lot of deep cuttings, and of course the box tunnel here behind me, which is over 2 miles long, and at the time of its building was the longest railway tunnel ever attempted. It was a huge undertaking, apart from the steam pumps to keep back the water, the black powder for blasting the rock, literally hundreds of men and horses, and the whole proceedings lit by candle power. I mean, when you think about it, what an achievement, you know.
Often we take engineering or industry for granted. We just pass through the great tunnels, across the great bridges of our railway systems without really thinking about how they were made and the sacrifices and the innovations that went into that. And when he shows us something like the Forth Bridge, suddenly it makes it clear that this is a huge undertaking and something that we should still be proud of, that this is part of our heritage.
Really, this is the principle of the cantilever bridge, like very similar to the Forth Bridge. As you can see, I mean, it's supporting the whole weight of my wife here, with not too much effort. I mean, if I were replaced by a girder, or one up and one down, it would be with struts supporting in the middle. It would be quite successful, you know. And it's creaking a bit, but it's holding the weight. Basically, this is the principle of the cantilever bridge. It's rather a clever idea. This bit here, in my sort of left hand, is the cantilever, and of course, this other bit is the counterbalance that, you know, actually stops the thing from falling over. And the bit in the middle is on the Forth Bridge. I think it's about 200 and odd foot above the surface of the Forth. You know, it's an interesting piece of ironwork. But we've actually proved and, you know, shown you how it can actually be done with a few sticks and 2 chairs and some big lumps of rock.
Can you manage? Oh, wonderful.
In the olden days, when they built these things, they always had a grand party on top with a brass band. Like, really, this is best we can do, the old gramophone and the champagne. You know, it's a bit sad, really, because, you know, I've knocked lots and lots of these things down, and this really is the last one to be built in Bolton. And hopefully, you know.
And long may it stand.
May it have many years of happy smoking.
Fred Dibnah's work as a steeplejack involved a lot of restoration and repair work on great mill chimneys. It gave him real first-hand knowledge of how huge structures like this had been built in the first place.
By the middle of the 19th century, we were constructing some magnificent spinning mills with beautiful chimney stacks like the one behind me. This thing here is India Mill in a place called Darwin near Blackburn. And it was constructed in 1875. And of course, when it was first built, it was even more ornate than it is now. It had loads of beautiful ironwork round top, which were removed in 1936, I think. Really, I think the man who designed it must have been to Venice, you know, because there's a tower there that looks almost identical. It would all be built from the inside, you know, off a platform in the middle, and as the walls went up, the platform would be moved 6-foot centres up the middll. But when they got to the top, you know, the great stones, you know, they know how to have a steam engine, a steam winch to pull them up, because some of them are like 5 ton maybe a piece. And of course the overhang, you know, and the way that they kept them in position while they got more weight on top were to put great vertical tie rods down the middle, you know, anchored into the brickwork below so they couldn't fall off. And then they built a bit more on, a bit more on, a bit more. As you can see how it goes back in, there's quite a few ton above the cantilevered coping stones, or the collar, as you might say. Very interesting, you know. I wouldn't like to have to try and dismantle it, you know, the same way they put it up, you know, it'd be pretty difficult.
And it could unfold a picture of how the chimney were constructed. I'd say to him, look, the chimney's made of massive stone blocks. How the heck would they get the stone blocks up? Or they'd use so-and-so, they'd use a tripod on the top, and it'd be all hydraulic action, as you used to call it, pulling down guys with plenty of muscles. They'd use a horse and a pulley wheel. In later years, they'd use a miniature steam engine that they'd haul to the top, and so on.
The spire of Salisbury Cathedral is the biggest in all of England, and of course, being a steeplejack, I've always had a great interest in church steeples and church spires. The thing is, finally, I've come to rest my eyes on it, and I'm afraid to say it doesn't impress me as much as I thought it would. Number one, it isn't, I always thought it was 500 feet high, and it's only 404. And it doesn't really look as impressive as the one I'm presently repairing in Preston, which is 100 feet less in height. I think it's because the one at Preston is much narrower than Salisbury. That gives it this wonderful impression of great height.
Because he was up there doing the work himself, Fred knew what the challenges were that faced the builders of the great cathedrals of the past.
This is St Margaret's Church at Bodelwyddan, near Rhyl in North Wales. And I've always greatly admired it. You know, number one, they call it the marble church because of all the different types of marble that have been used in the interior decoration of it. You know, basically it's the same stuff outside, but the bit that I really like is the steeple, you know, the spire. It's a work of art. The man who actually designed it, you know, he must have known a lot about the material that the thing's made of, you know, because he must have known how many pounds per square inch them 8 cornerstones would take, or else he was a bit of a gambler. And it's also a proper built steeple with a curve on the outside. When you stand right underneath the shadow of it and look up, you can see the distinct barrel shape of it. When you come far, far away, the trick of the eye, I think, you know, it's something to do with perspective. It disappears and goes perfectly straight and looks like a needle point. Ever since I passed by here years and years and years ago, I stopped one day and had a look at it, you know, beautiful steeple. You know, I always wanted to have a closer look and get inside like where we are now. You know. It's really interesting because you can see the 8 stones up above that takes the weight of the top 3/4 of the steeple. The other interesting thing is you can see where they had all the timber in the walls when they built it, all the put logs across to put the platforms on as the spire progressed in an upwards direction. And if you look right up to the top, you can see the iron cross tree in the top that the great nut and bolt comes through to hold the top on the steeple. I think I'll go outside now and have a look round on the veranda.
It just shows you really, it wasn't just industrial history, he was interested in architecture as well. He just loved knowing how things had been constructed. And he was also fascinated with the men that actually did the work. Fred was always a great admirer of the actual ordinary sort of working man, really, and the skills that they built up, in the same way that he did.
It's quite beautiful, isn't it? You can see there's evidence of steeplejacking activity of long ago up there, you know, with the copper rods and the corner plates. And Mr. Furs from Nottingham. You know, these lovely pinnacles on the corners with the slender supports, you know, fret worked out.
and the flying buttresses that join one to the other. Lovely bit of stonework, really.
The fact that he knew what he was talking about, and the folks liked Fred for himself, and they liked the way the programme was put together, they were learning how things were done without realising it. They didn't realise that they were watching the programme to learn how these buildings were being put together. They just liked the way Fred explained it. And at the end of the day, they would go away so much the wiser.
Fred served his apprenticeship as a joiner, and at Stokesay Castle in Shropshire, he was able to draw on these skills to explain the medieval construction technique of jettying.
When you get up here on the second floor, all the walls are timber framed and filled in with lath and plaster. It must have been a very important room, you know, for the family. And of course, if you had any friends around, there's wonderful views of all the countryside out through these lovely windows. But you must have felt a bit vulnerable if there were any enemies about. I rather think that when this bit was stuck on top of here, you know, there were more peaceful times. This timber framing, this window frame that I'm stood in, protrudes out as much as 4 feet over the stone walls down below. It's a technique developed in the Middle Ages known as jettying. And of course, this North Tower here at Stokesay Castle is one of the earliest examples of it. Joists of the beams used to support a floor or the floorboards. With this business of jetting, they actually protrude over the wall, which I'm stood in the area where immediate below me there's the outer stone wall of the tower proper. And then there's about 4 feet of the joist protruding out into space. But when I stand over here, I'm actually stood on top of the moat. You know, there's nothing in between me and the moat, only these floorboards. I could really show you better if we went downstairs and outside and climbed up the ladder to underneath the jetting.
Like really, the idea of the jetting is you can get a room maybe as much as 8 or 9 feet bigger than you would inside the actual stone walls, with the stone walls being very thick and the timber framing being very thin with the lats and plaster inserts in between. You can really see why they did it. You know, they could gain maybe as much as 4 or 5 feet all the way around the room, which is quite a big item. It must have been a bit drafty because you can see great 1/4-inch gaps in the floorboards, you know. Had thick carpets down, they must have. The joists, the actual floor joists are the ones horizontal sticking out. They go straight across inside from one wall to the other. And then there's the stone corbels with the vertical props, which are braced by these 45-degree members, which in turn are tenoned, mortise and tenoned into each end and pegged. So they give the final overhang a bit of extra support, as you might say.
I think as Fred developed his TV programmes, one of the big changes I saw was from here's something that's interesting to here's how you should do it or how it worked. And I remember clearly his descriptions of how people built cathedrals, which I thought I knew about until he was able to explain them. And I'm sure that got over to a huge number of people who'd never really thought about it before.
The thing that distinguishes these great Norman cathedrals from the Saxon buildings that they replaced is the sheer size and scale of them. And of course the Normans brought these ideas and building techniques all the way from France, and of course left us with these magnificent pillars and arches.
Fred takes us to the heart of buildings. He shows us not just the grand scale of places like Ely Cathedral, but then he helps us to understand how they were constructed, how they're still standing today. We take so much for granted about our great cathedrals, our great castles, our great palaces, but he shows us the men and women who helped to build them bit by bit, make them beautiful.
This is a demonstration of building an arch. Yeah, the wooden bit in the middle, like this bit down here, is what's known as the centering, you know, and of course, when the thing's set, we can withdraw these wedges down here, and hopefully the wood will come slack, and then, you know, and the arch will stay in position. You know. I'm very confident that it will stay in position. I'm not worried about it at all. So, even though it's waddling about now. Yeah. Now we'll come back after dinner and take the middle out, and hopefully it'll stay up. I'm fairly confident I think it will do. You know, I'm not really a bricklayer, you know, I'm only a sort of self-taught mechanic in a way. Right. Well, that's what all good bricklayers do at brew time. I'm off now. We'll come back after lunch and take the middle out. This is it, the great moment. We're now going to strike the arch. Success! I don't know what Mr. Brunel would have thought about it, but I'm quite pleased. Yeah. It looks terribly fragile in its present state, but if you imagine it being contained at the bottom and at 10 to and 10 past and on the top, the more pressure you put on the thing and the stronger it becomes. I'm going to attempt to sit on top of it and see what happens. I don't think it'll fall down, but you never know. You know. Here we go. I can't really get high enough up, you know. How's that? Just well, as you can see, that was one arch down at ground level. The thing is that you get the principle or the idea of how they actually built arches from that disaster. If I'd have used a bit more cement in the mortar, it would have stayed up, you know. But I mean, how did they go on building something like this behind me, you know, like 3 tiers of arches, you know, and all quite slender, really, you know. Must have waited a fair time for the mortar to go off before they struck the centering out, you know, but not quite like what we did, you know.
His particular contribution was in conveying and explaining in a really immediate way how things were put together. I mean, I've seen several television programmes on which people have tried to explain the principle of a Gothic vault, but Fred's the only person I've ever seen actually building one in his back garden. And that was particularly good. And there's the other one where he demonstrates with like model crane how the lantern of Ely Cathedral was put together.
This magnificent lantern, which is over 200 feet high, and weighs 200 tons made of wood and lead, and is hanging over precariously over this great void. This really is my personal idea of how they managed to get it up all them years ago. To raise up these great balks of timber, which I think are about 60 odd foot long, there'd be maybe 50 or 60 blokes, you know, on the end of the rope that control the actual set of rope blocks that raise the real weight of the thing. And of course, as it came up, it'd have other guy ropes on and men pulling the bottom out and keeping the top roughly in the right shop. And when they got it in a position where they could anchor it to the stonework, the next stage of the game would be everybody would be holding onto the ropes while some intrepid character crept out onto the sort of stonework and shoved in the big iron pin. This would have to be sort of repeated 8 times all the way around or 16 times really, because there's 2 for every corner. And of course the next piece would come up in the same manner with the rope blocks. And here again, somebody would have to pin it to
the masonry, and then, like when with the aid of a couple of planks chucked out on here for somebody to go out on, it'd be pretty easy to secure the corner there together. So you see how real strong it is. I'm pressing down fairly hard on this corner, and there's not a lot happening, you know, it's pretty tough. So if they did that 16 times all the way around, it would be easy then to lace it all up with planks from one to the other, and then construct what I've called the foundation ring for the lantern proper. Once they'd reached that stage, they'd reached a stage of stability where they'd realised the thing couldn't collapse. Up until then, it must have been very precarious, and they must have been a bit, you know, excited and uptight while they were doing it. I know if I had to do it, I would. I mean, really, you can't compare it so well with modern steel structures, because, you know, you can cantilever out for miles, you know, like the Forth Bridge, but I mean, things like this. They didn't really know whether it was going to start creaking and collapse or not till I reckon they'd got that big octagonal shape ring in.
It's a matter of looking, you see, and I think Fred was very good at that, at looking and understanding. You've only got to see how he approached the technology of the medieval carpenters who put up the octagon at Ely Cathedral. And quite clearly he's really in there, getting into their thought processes, understanding how they had put those things together, and what sort of machines they needed to make it work, and how they put a rope here and a rope there, and what order they'd put those great timbers up in just the same way as he would be understanding how an engineer would assemble a steam engine. I think that's a lovely thing to be able to do.
Really, a simple way to explain it all is like a crossroads. And if you imagine houses coming up to each corner of the crossroads, and something shoving on the bottom corners of them, you've got to shove a row of houses out the way before the thing can go downwards. And in a way, down below here, we've got the nave and the transepts, which in actual fact is a crossroads. And of course, the main thrust is on the end corners of the walls. So you've got to shove out the way the whole length of the cathedral in a way. I mean, it never come to that, but that's in theory what it is, before this lot can actually descend. It's all very cleverly done, really, you know. When you think it's so old and what have you, that it's a credit to them how they managed to do it, you know, all for the glory of God.
And he very often said, I think that I liked about him, he said that's a great credit to them, and you felt that he really meant it. There was somebody who centuries before had created this thing, and he was there appreciating it.
Well, anyway, Jonathan, tell me which is Cardinal Wolsey's bit.
Right, Fred, now from that gable and the gatehouse to the other gable, that's all Wolsey's material. And then Henry VIII added these arms. That one's actually a toilet for 28 people.
This wonderful diagonal sort of
diaper
blue brick.
work.
It's like quite beautiful, that, and yet
it is. If you look closely at the Tudor stuff, though, you see it doesn't quite carry through the whole facade.
I've been straining my eyes at it. It's all a little bit different, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's very irregular.
There's no proper symmetry about it, is there?
No.
Yeah, and then, of course, this new brickwork in middle, how come that's nice and pink, isn't it?
Yeah, now alarm bells ring, of course, when you see a completely different colour of brick.
A rebuild of some sort.
It is. It's an 18th century rebuild and reface of that gatehouse, because it seems that Wolsey built too quickly for his foundations to last long. And originally that gatehouse had two wings on each side, which made the centre part the lower, and they were taken down in 1777 after cracks were seen. And so now it's reversed its original appearance. It looks like a podium now, doesn't it?
Yeah, the chimney stacks, and they're somewhere else, aren't they? Every one different.
Now, none of them are Tudor, the ones that you see, but they're faithful copies of the Tudor designs.
I wonder how they got them, like, saw that beautiful twist on them, you know, that's an interesting thing, you know, I read somewhere about a stick, you know, the middle.
I think that's the way they build them. They put a pole in the middle and a template on. They just move the template round. Because you only need about 2 or 3 types of brick. It's actually very economical to get a spiral. You just move the next course round a bit.
Yeah, it's a good way of doing that. It's quite simple and practical, isn't it, if you think about it?
Isn't it? Extremely effective, though.
Yeah.
And made a wonderful skyline. I think when all the pinnacles were there, all the lead caps on the turrets, it must have been a wonderful view from afar. With gilding
and
on top
then
as
all
well.
painted as well.
Sometimes when we stand in front of a great palace like Hampton Court, it's hard to take it all in. We can see it's so complex and it's built up over so many generations. But Fred leads us through it. He shows us how each space functions and the people who helped to build it. And then we can understand it and we can enjoy it more.
You're a man who works with your hands,
Oh,
Fred.
yeah.
How would you go about making something like that?
Well, that particular panel, well, it'll be about, 12 inches by maybe 23 inches long or thereabouts, would initially start off as a piece of oak on a bench, and the guy would cut in vertically down the edge of the panels, and they must have had a bit of a gauge for they were at the right depth. Same at both ends, and then the timber in between all the folds would be done with concave and convex moulding planes and sort of small grooving planes.
So you just groove the whole length and that's done in an instant?
And the latest, that looks to me as though it could have been done same as masonry with an hammer and chisel, because it's all a bit up and downish.
I see, right.
But that's the sort of effect to get it to look like folded up material.
Oh, hence the name.
I had a friend once, God bless him, he's dead and gone now, but he actually played the fiddle in the alley orchestra. But he was a budding woodworker, and his favourite timber were oak. And before he died, he often promised me that he would learn me how to make linen fold panelling. And he did all his house with it, it was quite magnificent, the doors and the panelling and everything. They were very effective and looked very nice. Oh, this is Henry VIII's bit, is it?
Well, this hall was rebuilt by Henry VIII on the site of Wolsey's. I'm researching that at the moment, and it seems almost certain that Wolsey's hall was actually longer, bigger by area.
Yeah.
It's 39 foot wide and 114 foot long.
Yeah.
And this was the great ceremonial entrance room. So it's decked with tapestries, each of which would cost as much as an armed battleship to make. In about 4 years. So this is a show-off room. It's a design to impress you.
I mean, this magnificent roof is something, isn't it? I've always thought that they designed that because they couldn't get any big lumps of timber, really. I mean, if you think of the size of an oak tree, as compared with later architectural feats of, big engineering works with 60-foot long beams, I mean, there's no bit of wood up there that's more than maybe 10 feet, 12 foot long, isn't there?
You're limited by the length of trunk that a tree can provide for a beam. And if you imagine spanning 40 feet like this, you'd need a beam of, immense depth if you could
I've
find it.
seen that myself in industrial premises in Lancashire, to get across here it would be maybe 2 feet deep by 9 inches thick with a queen post and 2 vertical posts. Heavily braced up with iron rods to accomplish the same thing.
And if you imagine the feeling of lightness and space you want to get within this hall, if you have beams coming across, you've spoilt it already, I think. And Westminster Hall in the 1390s, they pioneered this technique of using a hammer beam and building it straight out from the wall, like a cantilever. So that can support then a vault, just over the central section of the roof. So it's a very light construction. Looks like the underside of a ship, perhaps.
And when it is all bolted together, the weight's basically straight down on the walls instead of trying to shove them out.
It is. It's a very elegant engineering solution, I think. And this is one of the latest, because Westminster was 1390s. This is 1530s. So it's quite late on in history.
Yeah, a bit before, they used to build a stone arch across, didn't they? And then, put the timber on top of that.
Well, they had variety. Sometimes they did a variety of timber trusses, but most of them are far less elegant than this.
Oh, I know, This is beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think it's Henry VIII's best piece of building here, certainly.
He would actually show with practical demonstrations how timber beams worked, for example, and how it was a very precise art, and something which I think people tended not to notice before. They tended to look at things and say, oh gosh, well, the ceiling's up there, rather than, isn't it clever how that is all kept together? I remember, I suppose because I'm quite interested in it myself, the whole business of hammer beam roofs. He actually made a hammer beam joint on one occasion, and I remember the slight nerves he managed to exhibit, I'm sure he wasn't feeling them at the time, of hammering in the last pin and saying, once this goes in, it won't come out. And he proved it. He made a very good locking joint and made the point of how these great roofs do hang together.
In the Middle Ages, like the roof construction, like hammer beam roofs and crook beam constructions, The main joint really in all of it was the mortise and tenon joint, which is basically an hole in one block of wood and a bit sawn on the end of the other that fits in the hole. And the tools needed to form such a joint are fairly simple. A chisel and a hammer. And then of course a saw for sawing the tenon on the end of the beam. And then of course it's held together by a dowel or a peg, and you drill the hole slightly out of centre so that when you put the tenon down the mortise hole and knock the peg through, the peg has a pulling effect on the shoulders of the tenon and pulls it all together. And that's what I'm about to undertake to do now. That goes in there like that, and then we've got this beam. The hole is slightly out of line, so when I knock this wooden peg in here, it'll have the effect of pulling the tenon down into the mortise hole. And of course, once we have knocked it in, we won't be able to get it out. So here goes. That feels very good and very tight, and I think it's solid as a rock. No daylight, slightly out of square, but I think it's the fact that that side of the timber's round, because on this side it's flush all the way over. Even for Middle Ages, that would be a pretty good joint, I think. Anyway. While we've been going about on our travels, you know, we've met a lot of craftsmen of all sorts, you know, wallpaperers, plasterers, leadmen, everything, you know, stonemasons. It's really good to know that there's still craftsmen and crafts-ladies around who, when given the right amount of time, are still capable of doing work at just as good a quality as what they did in the olden days.
Fred served his apprenticeship as a joiner, and he always had a great appreciation for the skills of the carpenters, woodcarvers and stonemasons who built Britain's great castles, cathedrals and country houses. This love of fine craftsmanship led us to a greater appreciation of the skills of the craftsmen of the past and of the work of craftsmen and women today who carry on the traditions.
At junior school, as a small boy, I was always top of the class in woodwork. I don't even think they have woodwork lessons now at schools, you know, it's a bit sad that really. But nevertheless, when I became 15 years old, I started to serve my time as a joiner. And I stuck to it till I was 21 years old, which meant I was a fully time-served joiner. And I got my City and Guilds at night school and all of that. And of course, I've always had a great interest in wooden structures of any sort, you know, like ships and buildings, and especially like the period in Tudor times when they built really the biggest wooden structures that were ever knocked up in a way. Here behind me, this is Little Morton Hall in Cheshire, which is a fine example of Tudor woodwork and heavy carpentry. They basically set off with a plinth of stone or brick, and then made these frames that weren't very big. They only did like one story at once, and stuck them up on the edge of the stonework, and then interlaced them with all sorts of bracing pieces, as you can see. And then, of course, they infilled it all with lath and plaster, and that's where, you know, this famous half-timbered building
saying comes from. One of the things that makes Little Morton stand out is the fact that there's all this lovely stuff in between the framing, you know, which of course is all made of wood. The beautiful four-leaf clovers are called quatrefoils, and of course they're sawn out of one solid lump of wood, you know, to that shape. In the olden days, it would designated that the more fancy what you had on your half-timbered house, the richer you were, you know, so the Mortons must have been quite well-to-do. The man who did the job, Richard Dale, you know, left his mark behind here on this window frame, you know, it says, Richard Dale, carpenter, made this window by the grace of God. It's like an early bit of advertising for window frame making. Considering the amount of acreage of land that the Mortons own, they mustn't have been short of a few oak trees when they started building this place, you know. Now, how many sort of workmen Mr. Dale had is you know, another matter, I don't really know, but I know something that when they were boring all these hundreds of holes for the pegs that hold the whole thing together, when they hit a knot, there'd have been a lot of head scratching and swearing. It wouldn't have been very pleasant at all, having done a bit of hole boring in fairly hard wood. But I should imagine that the timber would arrive here still in the round and would be split with iron wedges and then cleaned up with an adze. And then the mortises and the tenons worked on the ends of each piece. Yeah, I suppose that when the framing were more or less completed, the men would move in to fill in all the voids with the wattle and daub, you know, make it sort of weatherproof in a way.
I think sometimes it's very easy to think that handcraft skills are no longer necessary in the 21st century, but Fred shows us that these are still living crafts. When he takes us, say, to the Globe Theatre and shows us the timber frame construction and talks to the men and women who are involved in building this place from scratch, he shows us that there are ways of building, ways of ornamenting our lives that perhaps we should reconsider and use more often.
It is a timber frame structure. And we know that certainly the Globe and the other theatres were timber frame structures, is the way that the timber framing was done. I mean, this is something that we've really, perhaps in the last 15 or 20 years, really come to understand through reconstructing them at open-air museums. And there what one does is one carefully dismantles an old building. You then do archaeological analysis of the joints and the tool marks and the techniques. That really gives you a chance to look inside the joints and see, you know, see exactly, I mean, how they drilled out the joints.
Fred's passion for everything old, because it was craftsman made. It was handmade. It wasn't made by a machine or anything. It was actually a man's hands which had made the items. And so everything which was handmade, Fred had an interest for because it had been actually made.
Fred always enjoyed meeting craftsmen like Peter McCurdy, who built the timber frame for the reconstruction of Shakespeare's Globe. And for his next series, he went to visit his workshop in Berkshire, where they were making a new cruck beam roof for a barn near Glastonbury.
So you see, these are the main collars, and these are the upper cruck, second tier of crucks. And then we've got, in between them, we've got these intermediate principals, which have also got a little collar. These are the arcade plates, which of course run the whole length of the building. Now we're just marking in these purlins, ones that run along this way, and we're also marking in all these small curved wind braces.
And how long will it be before it's finished?
We're going to start putting this up on site in about 10 days' time, and we're going to be working through till probably beginning of February with the frame, and the tiles will go on.
Before the snow comes.
Well, we hope it will wait until March for that.
The real problem today is that we have a government and all they want to do is put people into university. They don't realise that to be a good skilled worker you need a high level of intelligence. So we should be going back to the time when we only had 15-20% of our intelligent people going into universities. The rest of them should be going into doing practical work, going through technical colleges, going through craft apprenticeships, and realising that the skilled worker, you really have to be highly intelligent to do a skilled job.
Of course, they make, I mean, you find all sorts of different sizes of pegs depending on the size of timber and the size of joints. I mean, here we've got a little one from the top of a pair of rafters. And then here we've got a much, much bigger one. And this is the sort of size of pegs we're going to be using on the barn here from Pilton.
Yeah.
And even bigger, in fact, than that.
Bigger diameter.
Certainly bigger diameter, yeah. So we could have a look and see how the pegs are made, if you like, here. Might even get you to make one, Fred.
Oh, I'll have a go.
Well, you know, we start off by splitting them out of the log. To split out the individual squares, we use a tool like this, which is called a froe.
I've never seen one of them before.
Well, it's not really an edge tool. It doesn't cut the timber.
No, just splitting effect.
Splitting it apart. That's right. Once we've split out a square or a rough square, which we know is at one end at least, it's the correct
size for the finished article.
Right. Then we use this little shaving horse, it's called, and a draw knife.
Whittle it down
to
size.
Would you like to have a go?
Yeah. Now that I know you want a octagonal shape and not round, I'll be all right. Right. Hey. It's a bit bent, isn't it, for starters?
Some aspects of Fred and the fact he was a sort of a craftsman in many ways. I mean, I'd call a craftsman someone who sort of just naturally has a feel for the things that he works with.
Nearer.
In that respect, he was a little out of his time, but also at the forefront. That I think we're now changing, and more people are giving up their sort of office jobs and wanting to go back to the sort of craft techniques that Fred used, because you just get so much more out of them. They're so much more satisfying in terms of what the end result is. And it's nothing better than actually seeing something finished at the end of the day rather than a piece of paper that you pass on to someone else.
Yeah, a bit old for that. Now then, John.
How you doing?
There's no roofs like this where I come from. They're all made of slate.
Right, yeah.
What really stops the rain coming in, because I've been inside and there's no underfelt, is there?
No. It's really just the angle, the way the straw's laying on the roof.
Yeah. When you're actually up here amongst it, you can see why, it'll hit every individual straw before it gets anywhere near through it, won't it?
Right. Well, we got a thickness on here about 2 foot.
Yeah.
So we've got an undercoat. Yeah. We've got a top coat. So even if it goes through this top coat, it'll still come out on the undercoat.
And what stops it all slurring off like? What?
Well, it's all sparred onto the base coat with hazel spars. Yeah. They're pushed in through into the base coat.
Yeah.
And really, it's the angle of the roof, the angle of the straws. That the water just drips off each one.
And what keeps the other on, like the base coat,
The base coat, that's tied to the rafters, and then we spar on top of that.
Right up at the ridge, there's that lovely crisscross design. Is that designed to keep it together at the top?
Well, at the very top, we just bend the straw over the top to keep it waterproof. And that's the simplest sort of ridge that it would have had hundreds of years ago that we're doing on there. It's not ornamental.
Because you see someone with like a double thickness, don't you, at the top?
That's very ornamental, but that wouldn't have been like that 150 years ago.
No.
We're trying to keep it sort of plain and simple.
Yeah.
As it would have been.
I mean, they were doing this in Roman times, weren't they?
That's right. Before that,
almost the same, eh?
Yeah, back to the Iron Age, really.
Yeah. And I've noticed
in their roundhouses like that.
At the far end, it's gone all darker colour, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've been here 3 months, so I mean, obviously the first stuff we put on is now gone quite dark.
Yeah, it's like dyes.
It will darken down in 6 months. This will be quite a dark colour with what the sun and the rain.
And do all the bits that are blowing about now? Do they sort of break up and blow away?
They will do in time. That's how the actual roof wears. I mean, we'll lose about 1/4 of an inch of that every year. Yeah. And that's what gives the roof its life, really. Yeah. Or that's what takes away. Yeah. That's what gives it its lifespan.
Yeah. So what it's how thin has it got to have got down to before?
Well, it's got about 6 inches to come off before it gets down to the fixings, and that's really the life of the roof.
Yeah, and then you've got to do it again.
Yeah, so I mean, long straw like this will probably last 15 years.
Yeah.
It's the shortest lasting material.
It seems to me as though you could take this top layer off and and still use the stuff underneath. Would
You
that
could.
be- Yeah.
Well, the next time this is thatched, what will happen is we'll just take this top layer off,
Yeah.
and then we thatch over the, well, take the bottom part out and thatch over the top again. Probably take about 5 or 6 inches of this old stuff
Yeah.
off then.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be old then, it's not old.
Yeah.
He just enjoyed craftsmanship of any standard, of any type. As long as it was really good, he could appreciate the work that had gone into it.
Are you going to let me have a go?
Yeah.
I'm
yourself.
going to have a do at this.
All right then.
All right. Wait a minute, I'll do it. I'll do it proper. How's that? Now then, we're here.
Here we go
What's the
then.
first move?
We just take a double handful off of there.
Double handful.
Yeah. That's plenty, yeah.
About that much.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm only an apprentice, so I don't want too much. Right, what do we do next? I
Right,
notice
you've got
you
to lay it
put-
on there.
Yeah.
That's it, and you just spread it out.
Spread it out, what, like that?
That's it. And then we take a little Bonder straw.
Yeah.
And if you take some of those spars on your left there, keep one of those like a staple. That's
And
it.
Pump it in again.
Yep.
How's that?
That's all right.
Looking good, isn't it?
That'll keep water out for another 100 years, won't it?
Yeah. Where does it come from, this stuff? Is
Well,
it?
this has all come from Poland, actually.
Yeah. I wonder why. Why?
Well, the reason is we don't have the old varieties of straw in England, and
yeah.
to the length that this is grown. And this
Yeah.
is a rye straw, which grows
Yeah.
very long.
Yeah.
So
How many thatchers are there left now in England? You know,
too many.
Yeah.
About 50.
that's what, when somebody says to me about steeplejacking, that's where how many steeplejack? You must be only one, and then bloody hundreds of them. Yeah.
No, there's about 1,500 altogether.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot, really.
Oh, aye, there's a fair bit of stiff competition. Isn't
Yeah,
there?
the other way.
Yeah, I've noticed them wetting it down there, before they wind it all up into bundles.
Yeah, the idea of that is so
yeah.
that it packs together tighter,
Yeah.
and it doesn't slip about so much. And when it's dry, it's very slippery.
Yeah,
It's very
yeah,
waxy,
yeah,
as you can see.
yeah,
And you have to
yeah.
keep it damp, to
Bit
keep it
like
nice and
your
tight.
haircut job, isn't it?
That's it, yeah, the old grill cream, yeah.
Yeah, there can't be many thatch roofs as big as this. It's almost like a cathedral, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
Unbelievable
it's
thing.
an old tithe barn, which
Yeah.
there's not that many tithe barns about, but not as big as this, certainly.
No, I've never seen a thatch roof this big before.
One of the places that I most remember going to on location and realising just how much skill Fred had and he could turn his hand to anything was when we went to the Welsh Slate Mining Museum in North Wales. And the boys there, the gang of men that was working there and had done for many years, would make it look so easy the way they cleave the slate. And I thought to myself, well, Fred's not going to be able to do this, although, as ever, he's enthusiastic about doing what he's going to do next. And he sat down and he took the piece of iron and chop, chop. And I think everybody there, it's fair to say, were amazed that he'd managed to do that because, according to one of the men, I think the apprenticeship was something like about 5 years or something like that before you were allowed to do that. And Fred had just done it. And it was like watching a little bit of magic. In fact, one of the programmes where his joyous look on his face because he's actually, wow, I can do this. It's fabulous. It's very good.
We get another load by dinner time.
We'll be lucky if we've done 6.
I think Fred will have opened the eyes of lots of people to the joy of craftsmanship and to the small-scale perfection that people put into things. The fact that they're not just making things work, they're making things work well, and they're making things look good as they do their jobs.
And looking good was certainly one of the main criteria in the design of the House of Dunn near Montrose.
The great glory of the interior of the House of Dunn is this magnificent saloon with its wonderful plastering, which are done by a man called Joseph Enser. And believe it or not, for all this magnificent ornamentation, he only got 216 quid, you know. It sounds unbelievable, isn't it? That weren't just for plastering this one single room, it was for doing the whole house.
When we go into a place like the House of Dunn, it's not always easy to understand how it was constructed, how it was made. But he takes it apart bit by bit. He looks at details like the ornamental plaster work. He shows us how craftsmen and craftswomen contributed each in their own way to creating a masterpiece.
Most people coming into a room like this would have little idea as to how they went about doing it, you know, but going back to my days at art school, they had an ornamental plastering class where everything nearly were made on the benches and then screwed and wired in secret ways to the walls and then touched up afterwards. I mean, in here there's quite a lot of interesting stuff, you know, like up there there's a basket, and rumour has it that they actually used a real basket and dipped it in like liquid plaster and then of course carefully fitted it to wall, you know. There's a violin that's reputed to be real, you know, underneath the layer of plaster. And then up there's seashells that are, you know, I mean, they're too perfect to have been, you know, all made, as you might say. But the whole lot has, you know, been made on benches and then stuck to the wall.
The main thing we've got to do with everything is preparation before we mix the plaster. Not everything's ready, the plaster will set on us. So this will be some Hessian scrim. We're going to reinforce the panels of this Stratwick ceiling. If we pre-cut it, it will save some time.
Yeah.
Have some wooden laths, which we'll prepare as well.
Yeah, like reinforcing bars.
That's it. If we need to screw it to the ceiling, it acts as a washer. So if you'd like to just prepare yours the same.
Yeah.
These will just snap quite easy.
Can I do that?
Yeah.
Well,
carry on.
It's very rarely today that we can make anything better than we could in the past. We can make it faster, we can make it cheaper, but it's rare that we can actually make anything better than we could have done, you know, 100, 150, 200 years ago.
Oh, the lumps are disappearing now, aren't they?
Just pour a small amount that we're going to brush in.
Yeah.
Lovely. That's it.
Right.
Just put the plaster down. Right, if we just brush this all over.
Yeah.
That's it.
Not like that.
That looks wonderful. And using our Turk's Head brushes.
Yeah.
One for you. We'll actually splash.
Yeah.
Just get a nice liberal amount of plaster.
Yeah.
And then we actually splash into the mould to get a good thickness. And it also...
this is a bit messy, this, isn't it?
Oh, it's a lovely messy job.
Right.
Right. With the scrim, just lay this over the top. Lovely. That's it. Pile that on the back. Give it. Make sure all the lath and it's all rubbed down below the surface.
Yeah.
So that'll when we come to strike off.
Yeah, it's not.
That's looking. Should be okay. And then just strike off over the top. I can see you've used plaster before.
Well, concrete.
20 years ago, apprenticeship started to die. The gold standard is to get A levels and go to university. We no longer value journeyman tradesmen who used to spend 5 years learning their trade to make things. We're seeing somewhat of a resurgence of that over the last 5 years or so through the government's modern apprenticeship programme. And I think Fred was very keen to support those sort of things for people who would rather work with their hands than necessarily follow a higher education.
I saw you noticed rather nice ceiling rows on the way in, so I thought we'd make some leaves.
Like
this is the rows.
Yeah.
I thought we'd make some leaves to go on it. So again, with this, if we just pour a generous amount in, that should be fine. This then, just push it down on the top. Starting from the back, pushing down, and any of the excess plaster can just spill out, come out the holes on the top. Should be fine. Just give it a good generous push. That's wonderful. Here we go. We'll come back in 10 minutes and see what they look like.
The craft skills are something which is always under threat. We have a real shortage of them in the nation at the moment.
and we need more craftspeople who can get out there and help restore the buildings. Otherwise, the cost of restoration shoots through the roof through the shortage of craftspeople. And so Fred was very useful in showing these people were out there that they were working hard to preserve our heritage and how essential they are towards keeping it as a living heritage.
So our leaves are doing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. This is the
Bend
frightening
the,
bit. Yeah, bend
bend
it
the silicon
away.
back,
Yeah.
and that should help release the
yeah.
help release the leaf. So if we can pull these out.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, that's
and then
better.
this is our. This is
Yeah.
just the flash.
Yeah, it's beautiful, that, isn't it? Yeah.
A small feather.
Yeah, yeah.
Stick it to our base.
Yeah.
And we have one of the leaves of our rose.
Yeah, very nice.
Sometimes it's hard to know exactly how a thing is made. It can appear to us so simple because it works so beautifully. But what Fred does is he really takes it apart for us and shows us how much skill goes in to each element, say, of plasterwork or a stone carving. When he goes to York Minster and he talks to the stonemasons there, these are things that it's really very difficult to see from the ground, but they are incredibly complex and very beautiful objects, and it's the stonemasons who have worked hard over many years to have the best bits of the past and also be reworking it so that it's there for the future.
Well, Fred, now we're in the carver's shop.
Very nice indeed.
And we've got to have Martin here carving one of the arch stones for the southwest doorway. The stone's been masoned in the masonry shop, as you saw, the geometric work. And now you can see areas of the stone which have been left for the foliage.
Yeah, that's quite beautiful, that leaf with all hollowed out at the back, isn't it? Eh?
Yes, it's
yeah. Shall we go round round the corner and have a word with Martin? Now then, good afternoon, Martin.
Hello, Fred.
Howdy. Yeah, I can see now the 3 stages of making them beautiful leaves that are on this side. Yeah, it must take a long time. How long does it take you to do, like, 3 leaves?
Well, there's probably about another week's
work
left in
there,
that. But it's probably a couple of weeks in all.
Yeah, when people walk by York Minster, they don't appreciate all that great effort. Yeah, how do you go about making these hollowed out? Like, you know, a heck of a tricky operation with such delicacy, isn't it, really?
Well, I suppose once the leaf's established,
yeah, like
see
down here, but a bit nearer than what that one is. Like,
yeah, you see the form. You can actually begin to drill through behind it and actually pierce through with smaller chisels.
Yeah. I mean, when you finish one of them, just getting it up there, you know, like the thought of damaging it must be terrific. I'd be scared stiff for taking it out. I mean, you need a little knock, don't you, and a big lump off corner. And
once it goes out of here, we forget about it.
Yeah. You start on the next block. Yeah. I've always wished I could do something of that nature myself.
You can always have a go. There you go.
Yes. I don't think so, really. I'm better on big lumps. You know, let me have a go on a big lump next door. I'm okay on big lumps.
Well, I think the fact there has been this rise in interest in conservation means that there are people around. I think the craftsmen had a very narrow brush with extinction, if you like, because there was a time when no one could see any point in doing anything by hand. But just in time, as people did get more interested in conserving buildings, there was enough interest and still enough people left who could teach, because that's the other thing about craftsmanship. It is traditional and it's very difficult to pass it on once it's died out. But there are now schools of stonemasons, letter cutters, hand printers, not very many, but enough to keep it going.
How long have you actually been doing it?
I've been doing it about 15 years now. I've been actually at the Minster 10 years.
When you first started, did you drop any clangers?
It's very, very difficult at first, very hard.
Yeah, did you ever get disillusioned with your efforts, you know, like sort of...
I still do.
Yeah, I don't know, to me that looks as good as how Michelangelo ever did on them leaves when they're finished and all. It's like, I've got a better idea now. We're looking at how you form that, and then this one's partially done, and then the pencil marks on just that radius, where, you know, the obvious next thing is to, you know, you've already done the groove there, haven't you? Is to make that nice raised bit, but, you know, get to the right depth in. what crowds me is how do you get all these bits all the exactly the same, which you have done very well.
Well, from the cast, we
Yeah.
actually take a slab of clay actually onto the building and take an impression
Yeah.
of the old stonework, bring it down here, make a plaster cast, and then with calipers you can actually transfer the measurements onto the stone.
Across the width from sort of one extremity to the other of that. You do with a pair of calipers, then you know exactly where you're going.
The spacing's all important as well.
This is the top, of course, isn't it? And that's the bottom, and that's the curve of the arch
That's
that
right,
it fits in.
So that'll go on the left-hand side of the arch.
Yeah. When people wander about out there, they don't realise that just one stone took so long. No wonder it took them 250 years.
It's very labour intensive.
Men must have started and died, without doing out else. I don't want to depress you, like, but keep going anyway. Well, all the people that I've met are like the lads who really do it for a living proper. Like the other day, the steam hammer men in Sheffield. No talking, like a team, perfectly rehearsed in every move, When they were placing the punch in the middle of the billet of white hot iron, like the hammer man, he can get it that way, so he's happy. The hammer driver can get it the other way, and he will like signalling to him just like that, just a bit further, and then when it were right, boom.
Fred Dibnah's real heroes were the ordinary workers and labourers, the people like him who got their hands dirty. From the labourers and stonemasons who built great medieval castles and cathedrals to 20th century coal miners, mill workers and steel workers. He will always be remembered for the respect he had for all those people who earned their living from making things. Wherever Fred went, it was always the workers that he related to.
This is really my period, the beauty and splendour of it all, I'd always like to have been a maintenance man here, it must have been very pleasurable coming to work every morning and fettling bits of furniture up. Now then, I believe you've got a squeaky caster somewhere.
Oh, Dibnah.
Ah.
Remove your cap, please.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Now, would you have a look at this, sir? I think there's something wrong with the caster down there.
Right, I'll have a go. Excuse me, Mr. Churchill, while I sort this chair leg out.
Well, he was a comedian. He was a comic. We saw this diminutive, flat-capped character, a working man, who typified the northern mill towns, whether it be Lancashire or the West Riding, up to just really a short time ago.
Best fish and chips in the country.
Oh, you soon managed that, didn't you?
You had members of your family like him. You certainly had friends like him. You went into the local pub sort of 25 years ago, and there was a guy like Fred in the corner, flat cap on, probably a dirty face. Fred was the epitome of that true grittiness of the north.
Oh, that must be the best fish and chips in England.
Pretty blunt, down to earth, and you knew what you saw is what you got.
But half of them men in London in fancy bloody suits on and the fancy shirts and all that are long for this, really. They might make a lot of money, but the bloody stress of it all must be terrible.
Fred kept reminding us of the importance of manufacturing industry and of the hard graft of ordinary working people.
Isn't it funny how everybody who does forging, when they've actually used the bloody tool, you know, they just drop it on floor, you know.
Well, he's like that. But don't bite when it should go.
Yeah, I'm like that. Where's it gone, you know? Where's the tongues gone, you know? Bloody hell, it disappeared.
You put everything away, you know where it is next time.
Oh, yeah. Well, got to say, how long have you been here, like, you know? Have you been here a long time?
Well, about 28 years, me.
Yeah.
Been in the industry all my life. 64 now.
Yeah, when we were talking about it before, you said you've been made redundant 3 times, but no problem getting another job, like. Yeah.
Last time I got made redundant here in 1999.
Yeah.
They closed it down altogether. No work for it.
And then
our managing director bought it. Sent for us back, me and Paul.
Yeah.
We've been here for the last 4 years, is it, Paul?
It's all these bloody third-rate nations, isn't it, who cock everything up for us. Same with everything, isn't it? You know. In my opinion, for every man in England trying to earn a decent living, there's 3 men who are paid by government, but God knows how much a week, can have a car, to say you cannot do this way, you can't do it that way, you know. But them buggers in foreign countries, it don't matter about them.
This job used to be a good job years ago, weren't it, Paul? It used to be a really good paid job, and it's crap now. I'm not keen to.
Yeah, well,
for what we get,
for hanging on to your job, really. Yeah,
it is. It's rubbish. Rubbish.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
For what we do.
It's a highly skilled bloody job. Yeah. Somehow or other, I've always been attracted to dangerous, dirty things. You know. You know, like
what do you call it?
Heavy, dirty, dangerous. Women. I mean, it must be dead scary if I come into a place like that, you know, and see,
There seems to have been a problem with people who'd actually worked in an industry being valued for the work that they did, that they never sort of felt happy to talk about their work or that sort of thing. And I think that's one of Fred's biggest sort of pluses, is that he made it okay for the normal worker to value his place in society.
There used to be 32 hammers, you know, from 500 weight up, like, you know.
Yeah, on a big roll.
There were 2,000 men worked here at one time.
It was Bedlam then, when they were all banging away. They were all ground shaking.
Well, they were all terraced houses all around, then none of them could sleep when big hammers were on nights.
You know, it's weird that, because I was born next to a marshalling yard, you know, a shunting yard. And all night long it was like, remember when I was little, you know, bang, 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 bang. Woof, 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 woof. And you just got used to it, you know.
It's like somebody living outside the railway, isn't it? Yeah.
And a lot of people really don't realise the amount of effort that goes into making something out of iron, you know. I mean, I had a fella in here who owns an engineering works the other day, you know, come in a fancy suit and a tie on and his own personalised registration number on his car. The thing is, he looked at the tank outside and he said, have you made that? You know, I said, I have. And he said, you know, a lot of people would look at that and they would appreciate the amount of effort that's actually gone into making it, you know. It's a very complex piece of ironwork, really, if you study it. All them lovely curves and bends, you know, like, we've lost all that now. The modern way would be a butt joint like they build ships and a great knobbly welded seam down the bloody corner, you know, sort of thing. I can't be doing with that myself, you know.
Fred believed in going out working desperately hard, in earning a decent amount of, adding a certain amount of brass for it, as he would put it. He weren't bothered about working nights, weren't bothered about working weekends. Saturday and Sunday were just the same. He'd work a 7-day week if he had to do.
Now we've got behind you is the big mill. That's where we do the network rail, all the railway lines for them.
If he got onto a site of a mill or an iron foundry or whatever, he could soon get involved, he could soon do a job, and they'd let him have a do. And he'd do an absolute superb job of it.
And there was nobody better than Fred at talking to ordinary working people, like the retired steel workers he met at Workington.
But in the old days, of course, they had to manhandle the pieces with a fork about 12 foot long.
I know, yeah.
And
bloody hot.
And there was before the mill was electrified, it was steam driven.
Yeah.
And at the finishing roll, sometimes there were 3 high. And there was one particular job where there was a lift driven by hydraulics, and there was only 2 or 3 fellas could do it. One was a fella called Bob Jeffrey, and if he slept in or out, they always used to send for him to come out, like, you know.
I know exactly what you mean, because getting it up to that bloody 30-second gap up. In Walmsley's Forge in Bolton, they had like a chain hanging down off a girder with a big hook on a big long handle. Just as it were coming out, under about last 5 foot of it, and then it went, machine kept shoving it, and then it shoved it out of plumb, the chain, and then it come back with, on its own, like bang, and you know.
And as the tail end came out, these lads with tongs used to grab hold of it, whipping into the next pass and away.
I'll tell you something. They made it look dead easy, didn't they? But they said, give you tongs and have a go. Bloody hell, it wasn't that easy. They had bloody couches and easy chairs. And when they'd done so many passes, they all like flopped into them. Couches in this rolling mill, they were out. They were nice.
Well, you ought to never have you sleep like that.
Yeah, I know. And they had a propeller off an aeroplane, ridden with a belt, going round and round, keeping them cool. Like there would have fan in there, but it were on to the side at rollers.
It's only one man.
It's quite frightening, really, isn't it, if you watch it? You know, if you realise what could happen to you, you know, if it went wrong.
Well, I was one of a group who was injured in 1962 when this ladle of iron fell. This shackle had been used, which wasn't really supposed to be used. It was a bit like the straw that broke the camel's back. After several times, it broke and the ladle was up. It was only a small emergency ladle with 4 ton in, but of course came down. And oddly enough, I was in charge of the job at the time, and I got knocked down in the rush. I put my hands out to save myself, and even though I was a junior manager, if you like, I'd never been frightened to use a shovel, and I had fairly horny hands. And I remember the skin started peeling off like blotting paper, and I'd only had my first car about 3 weeks before. And I thought, oh Christ, I'm not going to be able to drive my car.
I'll tell you what, look, most of this world is, you know, normal people. They never burn themselves, because they never do it like that. But it bloody hurts, doesn't it, you know, it soon takes bloody skin off, like.
He had a very happy knack of asking the right questions, the sort of things you would want to ask. And above all, there was that extraordinary respect he had for the people and what they were doing, and in turn he was respected by them, and you had a really good interchange when he visited somewhere, and you felt you were really learning what was going on.
I'd done a few weaving sheds when, you know, on chimneys. And I know I used to go in and think, God, you know, like the noise, you know, sort of thing.
Very noisy.
All day long, yeah. How many, when you first started, how many of these did you, I know each weaver looked after so many, you know.
I had 2,
yeah,
2 loom, and then I got 4, then I got 5, and then I got 6.
Blooming heck.
And then I finished up running 8.
Yeah, 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's halfway down, isn't it?
We used to start at 7 and finish at 5:30.
Yeah. And how long for lunch?
An hour.
Yeah.
Half an hour for breakfast, an hour for lunch. And we used to work Saturday mornings. 7 o'clock till 11:30.
Yeah.
You know. I thought they were happy days.
Yeah, well, the people go on about the bad old days and all that.
Well, I don't know. Personally, I don't know why. You had to work, but like I say, hard work don't kill nobody, does it?
No.
So.
Most of England have never seen one of these things running.
No.
When you do see it going and the speed things go at and how it shakes about, you know, the maintenance levels on it must have been, you know, quite frightening, you know. They only have 1 man in here running up and down looking after them all, and would there be a few, like?
Oh no, there were a tackler to every set.
Yeah, oh well,
they might have about 60 or 70 looms.
Yeah.
When I were a weaver help, I had 80 looms to look to.
How long did it take you to learn when you first came? You know?
8 weeks, and I was homeless.
And you.
One day she shoved me to the end of the alley, She said, you go homeless.
You go homeless.
Anyway, manager come, and you, after you'd learnt to weave, you went to help a man to run 6 looms.
Yeah.
And then you got looms
Yeah,
of
watching.
your own.
Yeah.
Well, time went on, years went on, and I started learning people myself.
Yeah.
And her what learnt me, she said, Evelyn, I never thought I'd have seen day when you were learning somebody to weave. She said, because you were a homeless little devil. I used to come home every night, and I used to be heartbroken.
Yeah.
And I was brought up with my grandma. And she said, you can cry, you're going.
Yeah, you
You're
didn't want
going.
to go to work again.
No, you know. Anyway, I couldn't take ends up. These are ends
Yeah.
through here.
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
set the loom on, pull back, pull a piece up, but I couldn't take the ends up.
Yeah.
And all at once, penny dropped. And when I got used to it, I
yeah.
loved it.
Yeah.
She said, well, do you want to give over? And I said, no, do I, Grandma?
yeah,
And I earn good money.
I think for Fred, the most important people in history have always been the ordinary men and women. And he also remembers that it wasn't just the adults, but there were children as well who were often involved in industrial production. And he recognises their input as much as the great achievements of their parents.
Well, that's right. This is where the kids worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got... It's a nice day here to come here today, actually, because you get a proper, authentic feeling of it.
Did they never have a roof?
No. No.
How many of them would there be here on this spot actually working?
Maybe 30, 40, something like that. So if you and I were kids, which we're not, but if we were, what we got to do is tip the stuff under here, right?
Right, it then.
There we go.
Yeah. And then what?
Now then, you and I got to work.
Yeah.
All right? We got to wash this stuff.
Yeah.
Here, have a rake. What would you call that?
Garden hoe.
No, coal rake they call that.
Oh, right.
A coal rake. So we're...
And the idea is that...
Wash it across in the water, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And we're...
Yeah, and all the muck disappears down there.
Yeah, so you can see what you got in here, can't you?
Yeah.
I tell you what, this is poor stuff.
There's not many shiny bits.
He did stand at the forge. You know, he did work with trowel and hammer and chisel, and so he wasn't just talking about it saying, wasn't it a wonderful era? He knew the era well enough with warts and all. So it wasn't just saying, you know, some romanticised sense of the past. He knew how difficult the past was because he largely lived there.
So you smash up your bits with your bucker.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. How old would they be when they were actually doing that?
You'd start work here when you're maybe 9, maybe 10-year-old. And you'd graduate when you were about 18.
Yeah.
You'd graduate to down the mine.
City and Guilds apprenticeship for lead ore crushing.
This is your main weapon.
Yeah.
Of separation.
Yeah.
So
It's a pretty. And how did a little lad manage to get hold of the end of that?
well, you can kind of jump up and get a hold of it.
Yeah.
This thing's called a hotching tub.
Is it?
Yeah. This is. You got a sieve.
Yeah.
Suspended in a tub of water like that.
Yeah.
And you put all your broken bits in the sieve.
Yeah.
And then you jiggle that up and down.
Yeah.
At the end of this arm here.
It's it looks a bit painful, doesn't it?
Do you want to give it a go?
Yeah, I will. I pretend that.
Pretend you're about 11-year-old.
Yeah. Well, that's really harder than the
other action, yeah.
I bet you'd be absolutely goosed after the end of the day.
Poor little kids,
Yeah.
Doesn't bear thinking about, really, does it?
I think everybody knew he was very much one of the people who was understanding industrial England and all the engineering wonders. But then he was able to transpose that backwards and to get an understanding of so many of those anonymous medieval craftsmen who were building castles, who worked brilliantly with stone and with timber to create amazing structures which are still with us.
This side of the castle, without a doubt, is the best side to show the various stages of construction of it. I mean, it's very obvious if you look at the main wall, you can see at the bottom of it, it's quite rough stonework, you know, obviously and possibly done by the soldiers while still under attack. Later on, when they had more time and a bit of protection from the bottom wall, they've completed the top 25 or 30 feet in a much better fashion, you know, better stone masonry and everything. And then, of course, last but not least, the outer curtain wall or the outer wall would be built later on when they could disappear inside if the enemy were approaching and sort of leave the mortar and the trowels behind.
He's very interested in the practical side of historic buildings, and that's very important because the scholars will write about the theory of architecture or the theory of engineering. Fred was interested in how the ordinary artisans and craftsmen built the buildings, and that's what's really interesting.
When James of St George and the King built these castles, spirit levels hadn't been invented, you know. And of course, if you go around and look at the moat and look at the bed joints of the masonry, it's perfect, you know, perfectly level with the water, which of course water finds its own level. The thing is that there wouldn't be any water, of course, in the moat when they built the place. And the only things they had were things like this, basically a stick, the piece of string with a lead weight on the end, and of course a nice hole that received the lead weight, and a line drawn up the middle. And of course, when you put it on the wall like that, if the wall is plumb, the lead weight will hang perfectly central in the hole, you see. If it leans, of course, you know, the ball's in the wrong shot. And that's how they got everything vertical. I mean, you can actually compare it with a modern spirit level, and of course, you know, bang on, you see, it's perfect. We've not improved that much, really, have we?
He was always very good at acknowledging people who had names, but also those who didn't, the extraordinary, the medieval craftsmen whose work we now see, who achieved miracles, really, with very simple techniques and very modest use of tools and very primitive working conditions. And I think he himself, and he'd of course come from a background where hard work was what you did and how you understood it. And he was able to couple that basic business of the day's work with the vision and enterprise of much greater things. And I think he had a very happy knack of putting those two together.
If you look closely at the wall, you can see two rows of holes, one going up and one coming down. And they would have had the putlogs in, which are, in other words, the scaffolding supports. And there'd have been an inclined plane up one side and one down the other. I rather think that would have been done that way instead of just having a single way up and same way down, to sort of facilitate the work to go smoother, you know, because the materials that go up one side and the men, after they'd unloaded them on the top on the wall, would come down the other side just with the sledges and the boxes and the bits of rope and tackle. This, of course, would save a lot of bother with it. There'd always be some Charlie who'd sort of start an argument, you know, you got in my way, and shove the other guy off or something like that. So really the work it would run very smoothly with a system like that, I think, anyway.
And he could put himself in the shoes of the craftsmen, of the people actually making this thing, rather than the way that most historians would tackle it, which would be to put themselves in the shoes of the monks who had commissioned it, or of the rich people who were paying for it. He was actually there in the shoes of the person putting it up there on the scaffold and wondering, is this damn thing going to fit? It's great.
When most people think of cathedrals, they think of stonemasons, you know, but there's a bit more to it than that. There were as many joiners, I would rather think, as stonemasons, and they would come into various categories, you know, the guys who carved the beautiful wooden mullions on the lantern, and of course stonemasons who did all the lovely tracery for the windows, and then the other branch would be the rough guys who did the infill in the walls, you see. And of course down here on this grass at that time, it would be an hive of industry. They would have built themselves a few wooden shacks to shelter under during the winter months, and I suppose a greater part of the work on the walls would be done in the summer, you know, because of the sunshine and the good weather. It's really quite a magnificent thing when you look at it. And of course you can see just by observation that it must have took them a long time. And of course, not to mention the plumbers, also the lead roof and all the downspouts, all of them would be made more or less on site, you know, with the lead burners, you know, magic art of burning lead together, you know, like soldering in a way. I mean, there's lots of modern examples of that all over this place if you're an observer, you know, and look around.
Fred was showing the history of the common man. He was showing what people achieved in their everyday lives and bringing it to the forefront of our knowledge, which is great, really.
At Culzean Castle, Fred looked at the work of the stonemasons.
When this place were being built, you know, there'd be a hive of activity, of course, and there'd be dozens, literally dozens of stonemasons. The thing is, this is a wonderful wall to sort of depict different styles of workmanship on producing the squared off blocks of stone. I mean, it's obvious that the same man made this here, these door arms, you know, each side. It's the same style of chiselling, and of course they dropped a bit of a clanger here. There were going to be another niche like that, but they obviously changed their mind and bunged it up. Here there's a wonderfully detailed one here that obviously the guy who made that would only do one, and the bloke who made this one would more than likely do three, you know, because it's pretty rough, you know, sort of thing, or he were in an hurry to go home for his tea or something of that nature. But it is certainly a good example of showing masons different styles of, you know, using the punch and the mallet and the various fancy chisels that they had.
If we want to cut a piece of stone for that wall, we've got to sort it.
Yeah.
We've got to put a new face on it and also alter the shape and the finish on the top and bottom bed and the joints.
Yeah.
I'll try not to hit my hand.
Yeah.
Because that's always a bonus.
Yeah. Never ever stop learning, you know. You can have a bad teacher, a bad workman who you're suffering under, or a good one, and you'll learn a lot, you know. And you can learn a lot more from an artist or an engineer if you're working with him than you can picking a book up and reading it. Believe me, you know. I mean, I learned how to do all this by being shown by another man stood at the side of me. I mean, you've got to read books to get the basic gist of it, but, you know, you can't really do it just from the book. Can I have a go?
You certainly can have a go. Spin it around and you can work from that side.
One of the most important things about Fred is that he didn't come across as some enthusiast, just going on with it about some engine, whereas, you know, you tend to say, well, you wouldn't say that if you'd had to work with them and clean them out at 3 o'clock in the morning. Because he did work with them and he really did know. He really was a hands-on guy. And his sense of empathy and connection with Victorian workers and engineers, I think, was so important. Because it's easy to say, yes, but they had short, nasty lives and they all got TB or died of asbestos or whatever it was. But the point is, he understood that their work still had an immense pride in it. The people might have been tired and working long hours, but they still put beauty and quality into what they were doing. And it was that sense that he connected with.
He was good on the crafts, because I think we tend to think of the working class in the 19th century as being always in a mill, in a factory, down a mine, and of course a lot of them were. But there was a very big artisan class of people, very like Fred, who were highly skilled, quite independent-minded. Some of them had training, some of them, like Pugin, who he talked about, actually had no particular education and were largely self-taught. And they had to learn how to solve problems and evolve their own kind of standards and ideas. And they're not the sort of people, of course, who leave behind a lot of written records. They weren't the kind of book writing and letter writing classes. But I think he really brought to life again their spirit when he looked in detail at the way in which the things they'd made had been made.
I think really that you know, I think I'd have been all right in the Victorian period, you know, putting aside all the poverty and the awful things that there were then, you know, hardly any money, you know, I mean, now anybody can say that, you know, the money business, the wages come into it. I mean, they couldn't have made wonderful things like they did if they hadn't liked it, I don't think, you know. I mean, now people are on a lot more money now, but the unhappiness is rife, innit, you know, like all this stress at the office and things like that, you know. I don't think they had time to be stressed, them men, you know. They were always busy, weren't they, you know. I think I'd have been all right in the Victorian era, you know.